Bring Julie in for the sederant and apologies, please, Julie.
Thanks, Provost, and good morning, members. Provost Claire Leach.
Here.
Councillor Stephen Canning.
Present, thanks, Julie.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
I'm here, thanks, Julie.
Councillor John McFadden. Deputy Provost John McGee.
Yeah.
Councillor Caroline Barton.
Here.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor David Richardson.
Present, Julie.
Thank you. Councillor James Adams.
Present, Julie.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Here.
Councillor Douglas Reid.
Here.
Councillor Jane Sangster.
Here, Julie, thank you.
Councillor Graham Barton.
Yeah, thanks, Julie.
Councillor Graham Boyd.
Yeah, thanks, Julie.
Councillor Barry Douglas.
Here, Julie.
Councillor Neil Ingram.
Here, thanks, Julie.
Councillor Peter Maben.
Present, good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor Jim Todd.
Yeah.
Councillor Beverly Clark.
Here.
Councillor Sally Cogley.
Here.
Councillor Kevin McGregor.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Linda Maben.
Here, thanks, Julie.
Councillor William Lennox.
Morning, here.
Councillor Alison Simmons.
Here.
Councillor Billy Crawford.
Present.
Councillor June Kyle.
Present.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yeah, Julie, thanks.
Councillor Neil Watts.
Present, thank you, Julie.
Councillor Drew Filson.
Oh.
Councillor Jennifer Hogg.
I'm here, thank you.
And Councillor James Kyle. Thanks, members.
Thank you, Julie. Members, if you just indulge me for a moment for some Provost remarks. So on Monday the 27th of October, seems that long ago now, was the garden competition, and a very big well done to everyone in East Ayrshire who won any award in the garden competition. It was throughout the entire East Ayrshire, and residents received prizes for a variety of best garden, and I certainly don't envy the folk who had to judge that because they were immense. Very big well done to everyone who participated, not only just our winners, but everyone who entered into those in our communities who make our communities that wee bit brighter. The civic recognition for Auchinleck Primary School on the 6th of November. I was delighted to award civic recognition to Auchinleck Primary School, my former primary school, for them receiving a prestigious award at the King's Foundation Community Partnership of the Year Award in April. A delegation of pupils from Auchinleck Primary School came in to London Road, where they received my award for civic recognition in an engraved rose bold. We went on a tour, a headquarters, exciting, I'm sure you would imagine. But we went to the Risk Management Centre, where we got to see the cameras that keep all our communities safe. And I think it's safe to say we've got a few young people who are going to be future employees. They were very, very well interested. It was smashing to meet them all and speak about all the good things, including the Auchinleck Talbot, and a very big well done to Auchinleck Primary School. The official opening of the Take a Bow Centre on the 7th of November. I was delighted to be invited to the official opening of the Take a Bow Centre in Kilmarnock, where I was included in the ribbon cutting ceremony, alongside Scottish Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Shirley Aaron Somerville, and Scotland Officer Minister Kirsty McNeill. The reopening followed a £2.8 million refurbishment of what was a former New Farm Law Community Centre, and it is absolutely beautiful. Take a Bow state their building operates as the main community hub in New Farm Lock area, and they can now provide a modern facility for a range of services for local people. It was a great event with performances throughout, and as always, I'll never cease to be amazed at the talent of so many of our local communities, the people in our local communities. As you'll know, it was Remembrance Day on the 9th of November, and I was honoured to represent East Ayrshire, attending poignant services in Leith in Kilmarnock Cenotaph, Kilmarnock Football Club's Memorial Garden, Cumnock Garden of Remembrance and Cumnock War Memorial. Many organisations and residents for our local communities attended to honour the courage and sacrifices of those who served and who made the ultimate sacrifice so our future generations could live in freedom and peace. We can never forget. The Reclaim the Night March on the 25th of November. This was to mark the opening of the 16 days of action against gender-based violence, where awareness of many of the obstacles, prejudice and dangers faced by women and girls across the world are raised. This year's theme was All Together to Prevent and end violence against girls, and encourage everyone in our communities and beyond to take action to support us. To start this year's campaign, I joined the team at the pledge signing stall at Tesco in Kilmarnock in support of White Ribbon Scotland, where it was great to see so many folk find out about the charity and make their own pledge to White Ribbon against gender-based violence. Afterwards, I was delighted to both address the crowd and then march in solidarity with so many others in the Reclaim the Night event. We walked through Kilmarnock Town Centre and to take a stand against gender-based violence and supporting girls' right to feel safe when walking at night. Afterwards, we went to WG13 to hear from local partners, including Women's Aid and the Star Centre, which is a rape crisis centre, and they had presentations that were really emotional. They spoke about how violence against women and girls and gender inequality harms everyone in society, and also in what way that includes men and boys. There was a really good presentation of the Holyguard app, which is an app designed to aid personal safety. And if you're able, I would encourage anyone to have a look at the White Ribbon Pledge and sign up. Christmas Jumper Day. Today, members, we're encouraging staff at council headquarters to wear the best Christmas jumper. Thank you, Deputy Provost and Councillor Sangster. This is to raise funds and awareness for my chosen charity, East Ayrshire Young Carers, but there is, of course, so many other ways that we can do that. If you're able to, I would appreciate if you could put a donation in the collection buckets when you're in the canteen, reception and chambers. We've made it really easy with a wee QR code on the bucket. So please do scan and donate. Your generosity is much appreciated. I joined the Young Carers just 2 nights ago at their Young Carers Christmas Disco, and they were so thrilled with the amount of gifts that everybody had donated. So I really appreciate all your contributions, member. Thank you. So we'll just move on to business, and before we do that, I'd just like to welcome back Councillor Crawford. It's great to see you back in the chambers. I hope you're having well. Thank you. So before we move into declarations of interest, just a wee tweak to the business. Earlier in the week, I was asked to accept a motion. I was happy to accept and just understand that there's an update. So Councillor Douglas, I'll pass to yourself.
Thank you, Provost, and if you can indulge me, please, in terms of the motion. The Deputy Chief Exec has furnished myself and the council leader, and I think subsequently Councillor Graham Barton as well, with information relative to the remedial repairs to the Harriet Bridge in Kilmarnock. As members will perhaps be aware, there was a suggestion that this could close, that has now been has been taken off the table. There are no plans to close the bridge, which therefore I think negates the need for the motion. However, what I would ask Provost is if perhaps the Deputy Chief Exec can agree to bring forward a paper to Cabinet early in the new year to discuss the further repair works to the bridge and upgrade works in that area to ensure that it is accessible going forward and into the future. If the council leader is minded to agree with me to withdraw the motion, if we can get that update to the chamber here today from the Deputy Chief Exec. Thank you, Provost.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Douglas. Are you happy to withdraw?
I would to support Councillor Douglas.
Perfect. Thanks, Leader. Richard?
Thanks, Provost. Through you, I'm happy to confirm that yes, we'll bring a paper forward in that regard.
Perfect. Good job. Thank you. Leader?
Thanks very much, Provost. If you can crave your indulgence and the rest of the chamber, we have a really heavy agenda today. One of the items that we've got in item 5, the financial recovery in terms of the East Ayrshire Integration Joint Board, is quite significant to the council, and it's came to the agenda fairly late on. Can I ask that to allow us to concentrate on this item and others, that we withdraw items 8 and 9. That's in terms of the review of greener communities and community safety, to the next council meeting, to allow a wee bit more detail on the paper, but just gives a better chance to discuss the wider issues that these papers will have in terms of our services. And if I would move that, Provost.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Douglas?
Thank you, Provost. I would second the council leader in that regard.
Thank you. Is any member otherwise minded? Okay, thanks, members. So that is agreed to defer agenda items 8 and 9 to a special meeting of council in January. David?
Yeah, well, just to confirm that will be on the 29th of January. There
Yep.
are other items already scheduled, so that in order to manage the business, there will be a council on the 29th of January, and these items will come back then.
Thank you, David.
And finally, just while we're on the order of the agenda, just to update members, and just we did send an email out, but yesterday, the item 11, the appointment of the third church rep, there was only a single nomination, and that nomination has now been withdrawn by the individual himself. He's no longer able to commit to the role. So that one, I would suggest members, you also would want to withdraw, and we will go out and consult again or invite further nominations and bring it back on the back of that one. I think there was potentially one potential candidate who missed the last round of nominations, so we're hopeful there will be at least one further nomination on the next round to replace the one that's now been withdrawn. But there's no business to transact on that for that reason today.
Thank you, David, for that update. Okay, members, we'll just move into business proper, and we'll start with declarations of interest. If anyone has any declarations, please let yourself known. No, that's fine. Moving on is the minutes of the previous meeting of full council that I will move as a correct record.
Second that, Provost.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 is a 6-monthly update on the cabinet activity, and I will bring in Councillor Reid, leader of the council.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'll try and be brief. Basically, just the paper's there for you. In terms of the first item is in terms of East Ayrshire performance, and it highlights the issue that we're discussing today in paragraph 4 in terms of the projected overspend and the need to do something about take some action on that, and that's discussed today. The second one is about the upgrade of the repairs to Civic Centre South and for the to the transfer of the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. Can I say that the Leisure Trust have done an absolutely remarkable building transformation of the building, and some of the plans for the building are absolutely I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the detail on them, because I think that's what a difference that's going to make to that part of the town. Well, we also included a commitment once again to the Boswell Book Festival, but maybe looking to change the kind of format of that slightly. Next items was in terms of the business loan fund, and due to the withdrawal, some of the funding of that, we've had to draw down balances to maintain that service. In terms of the investment housing communities with the housing cabinet, there's a loads of exciting projects there, including just confirming about the 48 homes that we've built in Kennedy Drive, or is it Silverwood Grove, that I've been round to visit. It's looking really, really good. And we've also looked at the next phase, which includes one of the biggest housing sites that we've ever done, and that's down in Cumnock, down is it Marcourt, round about there.
Cairn Road.
Oh, Cairn Road, sorry, that's a little bit, so keep me right, Jim. And it just mentions the increased programme in terms of installation of new kitchens and bathrooms, and we did mention that we'd met some of the apprentices down there, including the Apprentice of the Year for Scotland, who are doing a remarkable job with their housing stock. In terms of the next items from paragraph 18 onwards is delivering outcomes through change, innovation and effective benefits, and we mentioned some of the work that we're doing through that, and also mentioned some of the support that we've given to through the early intervention prevention projects in terms of school meals, free school meals, and some of us had the opportunity to go to St Joseph's recently and sample those, and that was great to see, and great to hear how popular they were with the Wains up there, and also some of the work we continue to do with jobs and training and sustaining the 250 plus apprentices and internships that we've had created in the last couple of years in East Ayrshire. Also mentioned some of the work we've been doing in terms of refit some of the housing stock, in particular Clinshard Place in Galston and Barwell Drive in Hurlford, and bringing in new technology into some of these constructions, and bringing really properties that's been difficult to let and kind of repurposing them for needs within the community. Also highlight the alcohol and drugs peer partnership. We've been able to extend that quite considerably with another 3 officers in that role. They're really doing an invaluable work. I think people that have suffered, and experienced and been through recovery are really well placed to know the kind of changing landscape in terms of addiction and what's happening in terms of the drugs, alcohol and drugs within the communities. And I'm pleased to see that they'll be starting soon to join the existing workforce that's there. So that's really good. In terms of the Ayrshire growth deal, we made considerable progress there, and we're pleased to welcome the ministers on, was it Monday? It's been such a long week. Monday, we couldn't manage out to the Moorfield because of the Storm Bram, but we managed to have a wee ceremony in here, and really was quite impressive presentation to see what £7 million is going to be able to do in Moorfield and creating jobs, training opportunities, and bringing money right into the economy. I think we're speaking about some in the region of 270 plus jobs at the moment, with more hopefully to follow, and bringing a considerable amount of money into the community. And it's the first real tangible work that that demonstrates what we're doing through the Ayrshire growth deal, and I'm really pleased to see that and taking place, and hopefully within a year to 18 months we'll have the first units up and hopefully completed within the next 2 years. So work continues in reprofiling in terms of Mauchline, in terms of the Mauchline Cars scheme. There was a slight surplus reported, and we're hopefully now be directing that to new shop signage and our frontage, and also some of the replacing and painting work there. In terms of the place-based investment, there's been a lot of work there too, and a lot of projects have benefited from that right across East Ayrshire. And we just highlight some of the Pride and Place function, Pride and Place impact funding, and great to see some great progress there. From the Minor Statue Memorial Cumnock, Alexander Fleming Memorial in Darvel, Reformers Kilmarnock, and Rugby Park campus, as well as other war memorials, particularly the one in Kilmarnock, which celebrates its centenary next year. Other issues there include the employability service delivery model. We're looking to increase that, and we're looking forward to the opening of the facility in Galston, and also I'm hoping to visit the one in Dalmelliton. I've not been there yet, and if they're any as good as the ones in Kilmarnock and Cumnock, it'll be providing an invaluable service to our young people, and also the employability for families concerned in that. The creation of the Third Sector Challenge Fund, one left behind there, was also one of great, and I'm pleased to see the members' interest around that. And finally, in terms of greener communities, the climate change public support report is there, which shows what impact we've done in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, and a challenge towards the target of net zero in 2030. I don't know if we're going to make it. It looks very doubtful in terms of we're going to make that, but we're going to have a good try and get close to it as we can. And there's certainly some very good work that's happened through this authority, and I'd like to thank officers and staff for helping us through that process. There's a lot more in that. I'm maybe not doing it as thorough justice as it should be, but it's there for members to read. And if there's any questions, I'm quite happy to answer them. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Leader. A really good summary. A lot of good things happening against an ever-increasingly difficult landscape. So thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Online, good? Yep, no, thanks very much for that, Leader. Moving on is the Cabinet Committee minutes. Leader.
Where's the correct record, Provost?
Second that, Provost.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Any questions? No, we're good. Thank you, everyone. So members, we are now on agenda item 5, which is direction from East Ayrshire Integration Joint Board in their financial recovery. You can find this report in pages 82 to 119 on your papers, and I'll bring in Craig MacArthur to go through the report. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Provost, and good morning, members. So, in summary, this report provides detailed information on Council Commission services that sit within the IJB that are currently projecting and recording overspends against the delegated budget for 25-26. It presents a range of financial recovery options to address these risks and presents a direction from the IJB to the Council in respect of the delegated budget that I've talked about. It reflects the need to ensure service continuity, financial accountability, whilst recognising the significant budgetary pressures currently facing the IJB, which includes a projected overspend at 1/6 in the current financial year of £10.28 million. The IJB is responsible for strategic planning and commissioning of health and social care services across East Ayrshire in line with the Public Bodies Joint Work in Scotland Act 2014. As part of these statutory duties, the IJB issues directions to both the Council and NHS Ayrshire and Arran to ensure the delivery of services within the financial framework. Statutory guidance notes that any direction issued by IJB must also meet all clinical and care governance requirements and professional standards to ensure patient safety and public protection, as well as ensuring staff and financial governance. So clearly there's a need for a fine balance between all of those competing demands within there. The statutory guidance also notes that should an overspend be forecast in either of the operational budgets for health and social care services, the Chief Officer will agree a recovery plan to balance overspend and budget. This should be done in line with the integration scheme, which details arrangements for managing the balance of any over and under spends. And in the absence of any uncommitted balances within the IJB reserve, both the Council and NHS Ayrshire and Arran were last year required to provide additional funding to underwrite the IJB overspend of £6.021 million 24-25. There were 2 financial recovery plans in place as part of that process, and a number of actions within them are still being progressed, given that they stretch over multiple financial years. The direction is intended to ensure that the Council can deliver the specified services in accordance with the agreed outcomes, performance measures and financial allocation. It also supports the IJB's commitment to transparency, accountability and effective partnership working. Paragraphs 10 to 18 of the report details the Council budget setting process for the current financial year, particularly in how that relates to the allocation that was made to the IJB. The Council's approved delegated budget included the pass-through of just around £3.6 million of Scottish Government funding to offset additional costs incurred to uplift Scottish living wage for commission services and free personal nursing care uplift. The Council also recognised a number of specific pressures on social work budgets nationally and locally. These pressures would have been compounded in 25-26 by a reduction in GAE. However, as part of the budget setting process, Council agreed an additional allocation of £570,000 to mitigate that reduction in the current financial year. There was also an additional, noted at paragraph 17, an additional sum of £1 million approved on a non-recurring basis for the current financial year in relation to children's services. In terms of the East Ayrshire IJB approved budget, paragraphs 19 to 22 again provide some detail of that budget approval process. That includes the details of the pressures that the IJB were facing in the current financial year, and therefore the requirement and the need to make savings. The large table at paragraph 20 details all of those pressures and the associated savings plans to allow the budget to be balanced at the start of the financial year. Excuse me. Paragraph 26 tries to summarise and capture the main pressures that we're facing in relation to the IJB. As I said, they're noted within there, including but not exclusively sustained demand growth in relation to adult and older people's social care, very much about increased complexity of care packages, the rising cost of external placements and indeed the external market more broadly, the impact of staff absence and the associated overtime costs. Ensuring financial sustainability going forward will require difficult decisions to be taken. I think members will be absolutely clear of that, having read today's paper. The IJB have been considering this over the last number of months as well. As I say, those difficult decisions are absolutely in association with the financial and operational risks that are currently facing us, and that the potential consequences are laid out as we move through the report as well. Conscious there's a lot of details at paragraphs 30 to 69 in relation to individual service areas and the pressures that are felt in there. Hopefully that does give a bit of context in relation to the particular challenges in there. While I don't intend talking through that in specific detail, as I say, hopefully it does give significant insight into what those in-year pressures look like at a service level. Maybe just by way of an example, there is a particular example just to talk through in relation to care at home, just to maybe shine a wee bit of a light in terms of the impact that additional demand is having on service delivery. So care at home is probably a service that people are quite sort of familiar with in terms of recognising the impact that has on our communities and the reliance that a number of our vulnerable residents sort of place on that. So analysis in the report shows the shift in care at home from month 1 through to month 6. What it highlights at month 1 with 1,596 service users. By month 6 that had reduced to 1,549, so a reduction of 47 service users. However, in that same period, previously provided at month 1 42,473 hours, and that increased by 5,502 hours over that same period. So less people receiving a service, but a significant increase in the number of hours being provided. And again, I think that just highlights the acuity of demand out there and the absolute need of the individuals in our communities. So we work all that through. The average monthly hours has increased per package of care from 27 up to 31. However, the average hourly cost has reduced from £36.50 down to £33.06. So we have seen a reduction of about 9.4, almost 10% in terms of the cost of providing care. So a number of those actions that we've described before about having to reduce overtime become more efficient, introducing total mobile, which allowed a much more efficient methodology around about how we actually had care packages delivered, etc., is starting to have a real impact. However, the demand for services is the bit that's overriding all of this. The additional demand is very much outweighing the service efficiencies that we're able to drive out at this point in time. So hopefully that's helpful, just by way of almost a kind of worked example. As I say, there's lots of that detail in those paragraphs. Moving on to paragraph 70, which talks about financial sustainability, and there's a bit of sort of national and local context in here. So Audit Scotland have produced several reports, both for us as at a local level, because they are our external auditors, but also at a national level in terms of some of the insight into the sector more broadly. So Audit Scotland produced their annual report to the IJB, and that was presented in September of last year. And that report highlighted that medium-term financial sustainability is at risk associated from the IJB pressures. And as I said previously, that is absolutely positioned across all 31 IJBs in Scotland. The national position has been widely reported, and while it's widely acknowledged as having reached a critical point, there has been to date no significant additional funding allocated in relation to social care, and we don't anticipate anything being allocated in the short to medium term. Therefore, this is why this type of approach that we're taking now is so important in terms of how do we manage demand, because the fiscal position isn't going to change significantly. The IJB Finance Bulletin 23-24, so this is a national piece of work that Audit Scotland produced. That was published in March 2025, highlighting that IJB finances continue to be precarious, this was their words, and that the budget process needs collaboration with partners and candid conversations with communities about the impact of savings needed to set a balanced budget. Budgets and proposed savings need to be realistic and achievable, and IJBs need to be working collaboratively with each other and with our NHS and council partners to find ways to transform services so they are affordable. Investment in prevention and early intervention is needed to help slow the ever-increasing demand for services, the cost of more complex care, and to improve the experience and outcomes for people. Locally, a significant programme of review and transformational work has been commenced, has been underway for a period of time now to implement the shift in support provision linked to eligibility in a safe way for the vulnerable people requiring care and support in our communities. It is anticipated this will take up to 2 years to fully achieve in terms of actually making that shift away from moderate to only substantial and critical. And all of that detail was contained within Financial Recovery Plan 1, which has been worked through on a granular basis. At this current time, East Ayrshire, in line with the vast majority of other Scottish local authorities, is currently providing formal social care support for individuals that are both critical risk and substantial risk. And in relation to that talks about urgent need and a high level of need. Any further review of that policy to further curtail the provision of care in there, for example, to move to critical only, does carry significant risk for individuals, but also for the IJB and partner agencies in terms of how we deliver services. Moving on to the financial recovery options that are covered within the report and that were discussed in some detail at the IGB previously as well. Paragraph 77 contains a number of bullet points, and the table at paragraph 78 provides a bit more context and detail round about that and what some of those options start to look like. The table, as I mentioned at paragraph 78, shows the variance across each area, which is significant, totaling 10.28 million, as I noted at the start, an analysis of the impact of realising some or all of that overspend in the remaining months of the financial year. The 50% column within that table, so the middle column there, details what would be or what could be delivered in the remainder of the financial year, and the end column provides an indication of the impact that would have in terms of the provision of services across our communities. It's important to note that the impact is based on average costs. That's the detail that's been the previous section of the report. And of course, members will recognise that every case is unique. So whilst the analysis is based on average costs, every single case is assessed on an individual basis. People's assessed needs will be different, and perhaps their financial contributions will be different as well. So every case is absolutely unique. So whilst we've used average costs here, it is just maybe useful and helpful to point out that that case-by-case analysis is still really, really important. Paragraph 80 refers there to Appendix 4, which provides and sets out the key risks and implications, particularly around about clinical care governance, the statutory duties falling to the Council, and also the professional standards that we would expect to meet, and the proposed mitigations in respect of these additional measures that we may have to take. It is recognised that some of the proposed mitigations to support this transition to financial sustainability will have resource implications, might require additional funding, and clearly would be looked through things such as the Early Intervention Prevention Fund and Innovation Fund to make cases round about where that might be required. We talk in paragraphs 82 and 83 about what would be termed a local conversation, and I think through Health and Social Care and the IGB over the last number of years, we have engaged heavily and often with our communities in terms of those local conversations. What's described at those two paragraphs talks about the health and care system nationally and locally that's under significant pressure, driven by, as we already know, demographic change, workforce challenges, complexity of care, and it proposed therefore that we undertake a local conversation to make sure our communities are absolutely aware of these challenges as well. What we need to do to rethink the delivery of social care to ensure that we do that, have and absolutely maintain a real transparency about the scale of the challenge we face and the decisions that we are going to have to take over the longer term as well to bring that back into balance. So that local conversation needs to include the voice of lived experience to ensure that we do hear from people affected by health and social care, the services that we deliver, to share their insights and experience and what matters most to them and to others who use our services. The approach that we propose would support the development of a shared evidence-based understanding of priorities and then support the redefinition of what a local social care system needs to look like that is both sustainable but also responsive to local needs. To support that transformation work, we talk in paragraphs 84 and 5 about the opportunity or a proposal to establish a dedicated review and redesign team, working together to drive forward the demand management service redesign across social care. The team would rapidly progress key tasks, targeted service reviews, model demand and cost trends, design and implement efficiency and pathway improvements, leading to a more efficient and effective service. The opportunity to do that just now is clearly challenged around about folks' capacity and capabilities to do that, given the challenges they face every day around about service delivery. So a proposal to establish a case to fund this is currently being finalised. Moving on to the final sections of the report, again, I just wanted to highlight paragraph 86 in relation to the advice that was given and sought in terms of the IGB and through here as well. The professional advisors to the IGB from a nurse and clinical allied health professional and social work were all, that advice was sought and provided, and it's incorporated into the relevant sections of the report. And I thought it was just important to emphasise that. HR implications, clearly, in terms of the impact of where we go and how we move this forward, there could and potentially will be significant HR implications. We'll want to ensure a detailed engagement with our trade union colleagues and workforce as that's driven forward. Although the main focus on what do we need to do in the very short term, as described previously, is very much about demand management and how we manage demand for our services at this point in time. There was a detailed equality impact assessment undertaken as part of the overall budget process, and clearly any particular impacts and decisions that we take in relation to this would need to fall in line with the EQIA that's been previously done. Any further and additional work that we opt to do, clearly further EQIAs would be done on not on the back of that, but in advance of that, to ensure that that was appropriate and proportionate. Paragraphs 96 through to 100 talk about the risks. The risks are significant. I don't think that will come as a surprise to anybody. They are detailed throughout the report, both in terms of financial sustainability to the IJB and the council as funding body, but also in terms of service quality, performance, and the impact on individuals in terms of the decisions that are being sought round about how the financial position can be recovered. As I say, some of those are captured at paragraphs 96 through to 100, but they are also covered throughout the body of the report and indeed at the appendices as well. Chair, I'm conscious there's an awful lot in the report, and I've hopefully tried to cover and pick out some of the key points here just to put a bit of clarity around about it, but happy to pick up any questions. I know that there's a number of my colleagues with us today, so if I can't answer it, hopefully some of the colleagues can do that, but I'm happy to hand back to yourself, Provost.
Thank you, Craig. Leader.
Thanks. I mean, this has been one of the most challenging situations this council's faced that I can remember. One of the certainly most challenging situations, but it's a challenging situation nationally. We've heard of 750 million demanded, as we heard when I was at the COSLA leaders meeting, and that's the latest estimate. I don't know if that's been updated. So there's a challenge right across Scotland there, and what I would be proposing, and I'm minded to propose straight away, is that we set about a task group, a challenge group chaired by the Chief Executive, with a Section 95 officer and the Chief Governance Officer, and Craig is head of the Health and Social Care Partnership, as well as support officers, to bring this back into line and see if we can get into a safer footing for the next financial year. So within that, I would be looking in terms of doing that as an addition to recommendation 10 in the paper to drive towards financial stability. And in paragraph 7, I would look for significant financial savings throughout the year, round about £4 million to bring us into balance. And the challenge there for Eddie and the team to come back to the council here and to the IJB with the appropriate savings, because we cannot, this council can't afford to fund the IJB to this level. There must be some kind of savings plan and some kind of strategy that brings us back into line. We're probably no different from many authorities, most authorities, if not all, across Scotland. This is a national problem, and I will continue to negotiate with government, as I have done through COSLA and through any other kind of means I can, whether directly or indirectly. And we need to keep that momentum, because local authorities simply cannot bear the brunt of this expenditure. And I'll leave the discussion to go on, but just to give members awareness, I intend to move that in terms of paragraph 7 and paragraphs 10, recommendations 7 and 10.
Thanks, Leader. As you say, we'll let the discussions continue and come at the end with any motions. Councillor Richardson online.
Thanks, Provost. I'm heartened by the leader's comments there that COSLA are making representations to the Scottish Government. I think I picked Councillor Reid up correctly when Dougie said COSLA are asking the Scottish Government for 750 million across all the local authorities. I actually think that's the way it's got to go, because as Dougie says, this is a national problem. To Craig, I've got the question, Craig. Page 101, paragraph 77, where it says, further review the eligibility criteria for social care support from substantial and critical to critical only. Craig, are you able to give the elected members in the chambers maybe just some practical examples of cases that would fall into that substantial rating, that the recommendation is that we might not be able to help in the future? It's just my own feelings on this are that the way to go is that local authorities need to get more funding from the Scottish Government rather than limit the people out there that need this help, because the help's needed. But I just want, for my own perspective, what sort of cases would rate substantial, which in the future you feel we might not be able to help if we're only going to concentrate on critical only? Give me some examples, Craig, so that I can understand that point a wee bit better. Thanks very much.
Yep, thanks, David. Craig?
So through you, Provost, I don't think I can give particular examples in terms of cases, although we can happily look to do that if members are interested or minded to do it. So I think what we do have is the eligibility criteria is defined, it's laid out within guidance that the government set. So there's a set of criteria around about what that looks like. I suppose in broad terms, the difference between significant and critical becomes essentially the difference between somebody being at significant risk of harm, almost moving into somebody who has experienced harm. So it's almost that part about picking people out when they've actually experienced the risk has come almost to fruition, and it's at that point that we're intervening rather than trying to be a wee bit more preemptive round about it. That's the level we'll get to. But as I say, I'm happy to share that there is a definition. The government laid down in the guidance what the definitions are. It's up to us locally to decide what areas of what level we pitch our support at. But the definitions round about it are laid out within that guidance. We can maybe work through a few anonymised examples if that's helpful, just to describe what a particular case by case review would look like, perhaps in relation to a learning disability case, to an older person's case, to a children's case, so we can actually, because they'll be different for each of them as well. If that's helpful, I'm happy to share that level of detail on an anonymised basis of what a typical case might look like. Apologies, Chair, I can't answer that exactly, but hopefully that is a helpful way forward.
Craig, that would be superb, mate. It's just an anonymised cases showing what type of person we're currently helping under the substantial rating, whereby in the future we might not be able to help them. I think elected members would find, well, I would find that really, really helpful, because it would bring home to us just where we're at with this, because I have a feeling that when we read those anonymised examples, it'll really bring home how important it is that the local authorities win the argument with Scottish Government and get that extra money, that 750 million, because I'm very uncomfortable, mate, with reducing the service we offer. I know demand's going through the roof, but I think demand's going through the roof because with the cost of living crisis and everything that's went on over the last decade even, I think more and more people are falling into this category where they need help, and it's putting up the drawbridge to a certain extent and saying, no, we can't help you anymore. That's not really somewhere where I want to go. I think we need to find the extra money, and if Dougie can do the work he's doing at COSLA and make the case forcibly to John Swinney and get some extra money, I think that's the way we need to go. But those anonymised examples, Craig, that would be, well, I'd find that really, really helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Richardson, any member, if I could just kindly ask you just to go through myself to get in. I was just trying to determine somebody else to come in maybe before you came back, Councillor Richardson, because there's just a couple of people that could have come in before you came in, just really respectfully. So I'll ask the Chief Executive for an update, and then I'll pass to Eric Sutherland, if that's appropriate, Councillor Richardson, just to have a fuller answer on your question.
Thanks, Provost.
I think for all members, when we're using these terms about critical and substantial, all I'm going to do is read to you the detail of what that actually means within the eligibility criteria. So critical is major risk to independence, stroke health, requiring immediate care, and then in brackets, life-threatening harm, stroke neglect. So that's what critical support is. Substantial support is significant risk to independence, stroke health, requiring prompt care, and then in brackets it says cannot manage vital health, no stroke, domestic tasks. So within the national eligibility criteria, that's the definition of the two terms that we just use, like that.
Thank you, Eddie. I'll pass to Eric Sutherland. Eric, yeah.
Yeah, very similar to what Eddie was saying there. If we're looking at personal care, domestic routines, home environment, then the definition of substantial would be unable to do many aspects of personal care, causing significant risk or danger or harm to customers or others, or there are significant risks to independence. If we move to critical, it's unable to do vital or most aspects of personal care, causing major harm or danger to customers or others, or major risks to independence. So those are the differences we're looking at in terms of a shift from substantial and critical to critical only.
Thank you very much for that. Is that helpful, Councillor Richardson?
Provost, it is helpful, and it gives me an idea, but being a lay person, I don't know if Craig is still willing to do it, but see if Craig was to actually send the councillors out 2 or 3 examples of households where we currently can help under substantial, but where we may not be able to help in the future. a wee bit of background, because I think if we actually read anonymised cases, I think that would bring home to everybody in the room and online just how important this is, because I have a feeling that when you actually read about the background that some of these people, some of the issues these people have, I think it's going to bring it home a wee bit more than just texts and definitions as to what we're actually talking about here. Does that make sense, Provost? Have I articulated that okay?
For sure, Councillor Richardson, and I see Craig just nodding at me there, so he's happy to do that. Right, thank you very much, Councillor Richardson. David?
I was just going to say that members will appreciate, and given the comments that are already made in the likely direction of travel, I think we would all anticipate this will be coming back, so it should be absolutely appropriate coming back with further detail in that savings target, cost reduction, whatever you want to call it, to have some practical examples. I think if we can just call them practical or working examples rather than anonymised cases, I think there's issues around about it shouldn't just be one person's situation with their name taken out, but we can give examples, as Craig said, and that can come back with the next report once things have moved along.
Okay, fair. Thank you very much for that, David. Okay, members, Councillor Linda Mebane.
Thank you, Provost. Got a couple of comments and a couple of questions, if you'll indulge me with that, if that's okay. Really be no surprise to anyone in this room or online to discover that research indicates that reductions in social care funding obviously leads to increased A&E visits, poorer health outcomes for older adults, thereby creating a cycle of demand. Charities and local groups round about this area are continuing to raise awareness about the real world impact on families and individuals that social care cuts are having. From my own experience, I'm going to single out the digital technology. One part of me thinks it's absolutely great, but I've got serious concerns in our increasing reliance on it. I'll use my 81-year-old mother, who is immobile, has severe dementia, was requiring 24-hour care. She was encouraged to allow her to remain in her own home. They would fit door sensors, cameras, and give her a flask of hot tea for overnight, but she was to be completely alone. We were assured if she got up and fell, this would be detected on camera and someone would attend. I'm sorry, it wasn't reassuring for me or other members of my family in any way. Thankfully, my family were able to secure a nursing home placement for her in the end, but this raises a question that thankfully we did not need to consider. What situation might we have found ourselves in if any further cuts had been implemented? Whilst technology is highly beneficial when applied appropriately, and I'm absolutely in favour of implementation of this, I'm not yet confident that it's always safe or suitable, and no technology can or should ever replace a human. In relation to the SDS budgets and the proposal to make cuts to the existing ones, I cannot stress how much against this I feel that we should be. We need to explore alternative approaches to achieving these savings without compromising the quality and safety of care of people who are already getting that. These are the most vulnerable individuals in our society and they rely on this. So to my questions, where does our duty of care to vulnerable service users lie? What would an updated EQIA conclude regarding the care provided if further cuts are implemented? I do appreciate there was one previously, but I think we would need answers. In relation to the delayed discharges, are we struggling to fund care packages after releasing people from hospital to avoid delayed discharges? And finally, I would like to understand what contribution, if any, NHS, Ayrshire and Arran are making to this budget deficit. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mebane. Craig?
Well, forgive me if I miss any of the points here, but I'm happy to come back in if that's required. So in terms of duty of care, I can see Marion maybe want to comment on that just in relation to, in terms of Chief Social Work Officer, in terms of duty of care and what that might look and feel like. So in terms of this report and the proposal we've made, I did mention a few times that we did seek professional advice and input from both clinical colleagues, but also from Chief Social Work Officer, etc. as well. So in terms of that professional input, we have sought that at every stage and we'll continue to do so in relation to our duty of care and the professional standards round about it. In relation to EQIA, there was one done, as I said, a kind of overarching one done as part of the original budget. Specific proposals as they start to emerge in terms of some of the detail would be absolutely subject to EQIAs as well as part of that, not after the process, but as part of the process, to ensure that as those proposals were getting a bit of meat round about them, then the EQIA process was absolutely informing and making sure that we were complying with the EQIA as we went along. Probably just helpful to reflect that EQIA typically doesn't say you don't do something. It's about what do you need to do to mitigate against it. So it's understanding the mitigations and what we need to put in place to make sure that can be mitigated as best as possible, and understanding what those additional steps look like. Clearly for some of those mitigations there would be a financial cost to it as well. So it's getting to that level of detail is important, like you say, to understand if we have to put a mitigation in, what does that look and feel like, to protect against the potential impacts that might have in there. In terms of the broader approach of what we're taking here in relation to, for example, the eligibility criteria, that was about how do we prioritise our limited resources to the areas or to the individuals, the bits of our community in greatest need. So that was about trying to align ourselves as best we can in terms of equality impact. So it was making sure that we prioritised in a really fair and honest and open and transparent way. And that's the purpose behind all of the steps and the actions that we take. That's not to diminish from the fact that there will be impacts here. So I think, again, being really clear and open about this, the decisions that we need to take here and we're looking at will have impacts on vulnerable people. That's the inevitability around about this. In terms of the delayed discharges, that we do still have a good record in terms of delayed discharges. We still perform well, perhaps not in terms of as well as did previously, but we are still typically upper quartile in comparison to other areas across Scotland. We still have a proud record of the 14-day delayed discharge in terms of those standard delays in the target, the only target that is set nationally. We don't have any over 14-day delays for people seeking a care package or standard package or standard discharge from hospital. That does remain challenging. So the average length of stay for the standard is increasing, but it is still under the 14-day target. The biggest challenge we have in relation to delayed discharges for adults with incapacity, those that go through a guardianship process, that takes a long time. So that's typically where our biggest number of delays sit. But as I say, for people needing a package of care, we do typically and can typically respond really quickly to get people out of hospital. Once they have that package of care and out of hospital, that remains in place. So it's not that we get them out and take it off of them. We do have a reablement approach. So sometimes there's a real intensity around about the support somebody will get to get them out of hospital, and then that will reduce through time as we can get them back into the independent living sort of model or mode. But that's actually getting them out of the hospital with a care package doesn't then result in a further reduction necessarily. The final point you made there in relation to how much of a contribution that is NHS Ayrshire and Arran making towards the financial deficit at this point in time, the answer to that is nothing. There is no financial contribution being made in there. What we are seeing, however, is significant pressures in the hospital and across NHS Ayrshire and Arran as well. Their own financial position, similar to ours here and to the councils, is one of extreme challenge, where the funding they are currently receiving is insufficient to deliver the services that they have within their own plans, and that remains a real challenge for them in terms of how they take that through their own governance steps. So that's not to diminish from the fact that there might or potentially could be some different type of conversation, but at this point in time there is no financial contribution being made by NHS Ayrshire and Arran towards this, albeit we do work really closely with them to ensure that the services that we deliver are as joined up as they can be, to minimise any sort of waste within the system that can be as efficient and as effective as possible. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, maybe that okay enough? Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillor Claire Maitland.
Thank you, Provost. And the leader started off talking about what a difficult situation this is. It's the most difficult situation I've ever faced, I think, in this council, along with the other members and my colleagues that sit in the IGIB and the Health and Social Care Partnership. So just a few points. What we have in front of us today is a paper presented by Craig here on patient safety and public protection, and that's the two balances that we have to make here. We're facing rising costs of care, and we've heard about the complexity of care as well. We're still progressing two recovery plans, and as with the leader, I absolutely agree that the direction should be back to instructing the Health and Social Care Partner to get its budget in line. And if we take this hit this year, it stops recurring hits for the following years. This is hard, this is difficult, this is about people. So Despite all of that, I do think it's only fair that we recognise the savings that have been made and the £20 million that came at us in care that wasn't scheduled. So that gives you an idea of the amount of care that we're actually giving out. So some of these savings and efficiency have been made in line with the 3 financial recovery plans, are the 2 that are now ongoing. But some of the services we deliver, and Linda's highlighted that, in delayed discharges are actually almost a punishment. We're being punished for actually being so good with our delayed discharges. It's been seen throughout the whole of Scotland. We're held up as an exemplar. And in fact, the Power of Attorney initiative that we took here at East Ayrshire is getting looked to be rolled out nationally now. So these are areas we've looked at, savings we have made. We do not want to be sitting on a massive underspend where our people are waiting to be seen. So where is the balance between recurring and underspends? I think it's important we face up to it this year and that we take it, just like we have done in other departments. To go back to a few more points here, some of the successes we make, and it may seem unusual to talk about successes in this area, is that we have 200 less people in care homes than we would if we didn't have this service here. So a quick point on the digital care. Digital care doesn't suit everybody, but our investment in digital care, and especially in telemobile, the telemobile has saved us equivalent of 41 staff, and that's been a spend to save within the next 3 years. This has not come at us out of the blue. We have been working line by line along with this. So you can see some of the care problems we faced, and that was highlighted by Grabe at paragraph 35. But we've also made a 10% in those care packages that are highlighted at paragraph 25, and I think that needs to be noted as well. This is a very, very difficult situation and a very emotional situation we are in. Councillor Richardson asked for examples. Linda gave one there herself. I've given examples of my own father's care here as well. My inbox is full of care packages and what care is required. So just to finish, we've got a lot of recommendations in front of us at paragraph 2, but number 10 is the one that we really have to look to here. I thoroughly support the leader in putting together a redesign team headed by Eddie and other senior officers. And I look forward to the end of January to see what kind of financial figures we have coming before us. So the detail that some people are looking for is within these papers. These are very, very detailed. It may be a short looking paper for some of the things we sit with here today, but your appendixes on risk, the care that we deliver, it's all in there. And so is the stark reality of the risks if we take some cuts compared to others. So it's been a very difficult year, and I would like to recommend what's in front of us today, especially numeral 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Thank you, Provost. Craig, hopefully it's just a simple request from myself. With regards to the financial recovery options, I'm obviously got particular interest in what the ideas, the current thinking is about reducing the reliance on the out-with placements, out-with local authority placements for children and young people. So if I could register my interest in finding out what the current thinking and direction of travel is there, and if you can put me in touch with the relevant officer, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Through you, Provost, happy to start those conversations round about that as well, to give the information in there. So again, probably the out-with placements for young people is one of those absolute examples round about. Everyone's very, very different. So whilst we talk about averages within the report, I think when you start to talk then about individual children who are in an out-with placement, those needs of those individual children are very, very specific and very different. So there does need to be a really detailed analysis round about, almost not almost, but absolutely on an individualised person by person basis. But happy to have that conversation, Councillor Cowan, just to provide more information.
Yep, thanks, Craig. Is that okay? Yep, thank you. Councillor Ian Linton.
Thank you very much, Provost. I begin by fully welcoming the leaders' initial comments, particularly around the countrywide issues of the difficulties IJBs up and down the country find themselves in. I was involved in the setting up of the East Ayrshire IJB back when Eddie was the chief executive of the organisation. We set out with a clear understanding that East Ayrshire IJB concentrate on providing in-house packages, reducing delayed discharges and our over-reliance on private nursing homes. We have a proud record here in East Ayrshire of cooperation between the Council and East Ayrshire IJB, delivering essential services to our residents. I welcome the setting up of a working group chaired by Eddie, the Chief Executive, so we as councillors can take comfort in any future decisions we will be asked to make from a much better, a much more fully informed position. And I think, given the significance of what we've been asked to do today, that for me is the key to this. We need that cooperation to continue.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Linton, for sure. Deputy Provost.
Thanks, Provost. Just Craig, 3 questions I think I've got for you. Just to go back to a point Councillor Maitland made regarding delayed discharges. So we've got quite a good record. 14-day delayed discharges been about 0. But if we had a poor record, we'd be spending less money, because my understanding is as soon as we get somebody out of hospital and put them in their own home, the cost falls to us, whereas if they were delayed, the cost would fall to the health service. So we're just looking for some clarity on that. And I was just wanting a wee bit more meat in the bone regarding the reduced reliance on out-with authority placements for children and young people. I thought some years back we'd already reduced that reliance. I was just wondering if that's changed over the years, obviously. And the other point was just at I think it's paragraph 80, where it goes, is recognised that some of the proposed mitigations to support the transition to financial sustainability will have resource implications and may require additional funding, potentially through the Early Intervention and Prevention and Innovation Fund. So just wondering, how would we go about tapping into Early Intervention and Prevention Fund? I thought that was some kind of, we need to decide through all 32 councillors, but I've been challenged in that in the past, and maybe I've just read it all wrong, but I thought that Early Intervention Prevention Fund was something that, as a council, all 32 councillors decided that. Thank you.
Through you, Provost, and maybe give Marion a chance to pick this up, but maybe defer to Marion in terms of the external placements, in terms of where we were to where we are now, and there's clearly a number of different factors will have impacted on that, but hopefully Marion can pick up some of the detail. In relation to your final point there, so I think we have, in terms of health and social care, we have accessed the Early Intervention Prevention Fund and the Innovation Fund previously, round about some of the innovative stuff we wanted to take forward, and it is now delivering. I think I mentioned previously Total Mobile as an example, so that was funded through those council funds in order to allow us to deliver that service, or an updated system, and revisions to the service in the back of that, which has been really effective. It delivered well, it was on budget, etc., when it came in terms of times, and it's now having a real impact in terms of scheduling, which is sort of flowing through into the increased efficiency of the service. Anything additional to that, if there were further opportunities, then it would be through that same process where we need to put together a business case and it'll come back through those council governance procedures to agree or to seek approval round about what the ask would be for that. In relation to delayed discharges, so yeah, I think fundamentally, whilst a person is in hospital, then the cost of their care will fall on the NHS because they're an inpatient in the hospital, so there is a cost burden on the NHS whilst somebody is an inpatient at the point of them being discharged back home. And it's probably helpful just to remind everybody that probably in the region of 97% of people who leave hospital don't have a delayed discharge and they don't have any care requirements, so the vast majority of people aren't our responsibility. They go home safely, and there's no further care required. But for the very small number who do require some form of ongoing care, then yes, as soon as they're discharged and that care package in place, then it falls to us in terms of the local authority to pick up that care package thereafter. As you'd anticipate, the cost of delivering a care package is much cheaper than it would be of delivering an inpatient part of it in terms of the person being in hospital. So the cost impact is very different. But it's probably also affect, or right, just to point at this, to say at this point in time that remaining in hospital is not the right outcome for an individual either. So when the person's medically fit to leave hospital, I think it is incumbent on us, and it's the right thing to do, is to get that person home as quickly as they can to allow the recovery to take place. The longer they stay in hospital, then the outcome, the prognosis becomes more challenging for them in terms of rehab and recovery, etc. So it is absolutely, once they're medically fit, we do want to get them out as quickly as possible because it is the right thing to do. But as you've highlighted, the implications, the cost implications of that are exactly as you described. In terms of the out with placements or the external placements, okay, to just hand to Marion. Thanks.
Thanks very much. In terms of the out with placements, over the probably about 15 to 20 years, there has been an overall reduction in the use of out with placements, particularly in relation to foster care placements out with East Ayrshire. So from perhaps 10 years ago, we would have had, I think it was 44 out with placements, mostly in foster care. We now have 24. In terms of specifically around the out with placement steering group, which looks at residential placements, care and residential, and a range of education provision placements, the numbers there have been relatively static over the 20-year period that I've looked at. That's been in operation. So, and these are averages, so you have to bear with me, but I'll give you some information for the last 5 years. So for the last year, and these are just broad headings, so we can get the detail. We can drill down on the detail on this later on. But in terms of 2020-21, there was 35 placements from the OPSG supported that had education heading. There were 18 that had the residential and care and residential. The following year, so 2021-22, there was 40 for education, 18 residential care and education. Again, 22-23, in terms of education, there was 44. And in terms of residential care and education, there was 20. 23-24, it was 42 and 20. So you can see it's a broadly similar approach. We took some action mid 2024 to track, because there was projecting an overspend, and we've seen a reduction in relation to that, where we've gone to 35 and 21, and currently we're sitting with, in terms of external residential, 18, and I would need to double check on the education because I don't have that to hand. But you can see broadly over the 20 years that out with placement screening group in various different forms has operated. On average, it's a 20 for care and education and residential, and around a 35 to 45 for various education provisions. And that need has remained relatively static and similar with those kind of fluctuations that I've described. In terms of some of the action that we've taken to support, this is challenged by particularly the highest cost placements for out with placements is the residential placements, as folk will know, that can be upwards of £250,000 per child per year. We have 3 children, for example, who have exercised their right to continuing care, which means that they've chosen to stay in their placement post 18, and they have that right up to 21. So we have been, whilst there's been movement in the placements, the rights around continuing care have challenged that. And on average, since that's come in, it has been 2 or 3 children a year. So those numbers would have been less, but changes in legislation and eligibility have meant that they've remained relatively static. I hope that made sense. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks very much for that, Marion. It's really helpful. Councillor Graham Boyd.
Thanks, Provost. I'll admit myself, the IJB isn't one of my strongest areas, so I'm taking on board what other more knowledgeable members are saying here. All I'm saying is we simply can't afford to lose that money, and Councillor Richardson's right, we need to look at the Scottish Government there. And there's maybe the bigger picture with the NHS and funding there. There's too much bureaucracy and top-heavy management in the NHS, so maybe if that was stand out, it would help, but that's probably out with us. But we simply can't continue losing that money. And I agree, we do need to continue supporting the people. It really is difficult.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Neil Watts.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, no, this is a really difficult situation, and the £10 million black hole as such that we have here within our social care services isn't unique to East Ayrshire. It's across the whole of Scotland. You know, we've got record high waiting lists for A&E. We've got waiting lists for general treatment, mental health services. Over the last 15 odd years, it has got worse. What I would suggest, I welcome Councillor Reid's amendment there for, if you like, the task force. But I do have an amendment that I would like to add in. Would you like me to give it now, or do you want me to give it later?
Yeah, no, sure, if yeah.
Right, okay. So adding in to little 12 would read as follows. Council recognises that East Ayrshire Council area faces challenges in delivering sustainable health and social care due to its rural geography and demographic change, and that Council believes that urgent and coordinated action is required to safeguard the well-being of our communities and ensure equitable access to social care, and therefore that resolves to 1. Declare a health and social care emergency in East Ayrshire. 2. Call on the Scottish Government to urgently ensure that sustainable funding is made available to local authorities and health and social care partnerships to deliver integrated social care, deliver improved recruitment and retention of key workers, and support investment into early intervention, family support and community-led services to reduce demand on the crisis in care. 3. Call on the Scottish Government to urgently reassess the rural health and social care premium in national funding allocations, recognising the higher costs and logistical challenges of service delivery in areas like East Ayrshire, and recognising that action is needed to tackle inequalities across rural and urban Scotland. 4. Support further development of local training pathways and key worker housing initiatives, partnering with colleges and NHS Ayrshire and Arran to create care apprenticeships and training for local residents to address recruitment and retention challenges within health and social care workforce. And 5, the Council instructs that the Leader of the Council write to the the Leader of the Council writes to the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care to convey this message and request a meeting between the Cabinet Secretary and the Leader of the Council and the leaders of the Conservative and Labour opposition groups to set out how the Scottish Government proposes to address these issues and ensure a sustainable future for the health and social care sector here in East Ayrshire. I will send this to everybody via email in a second.
Perfect, Councillor Watts. Thank you very much. I'll just take some more comments to the floor before we move to motions, okay? Councillor Maitland?
Thank you, Provost. And I was just going to say that was rather long and detailed, and it's very similar to other amendments I've seen from other councils. So I think we'd have to take a bit of time to look at that. Thank you. I'm looking for advice.
So much advice, if the will of council is to have an adjournment to allow members to consider what's been put forward, that would be perfectly appropriate. As you say, there is a lot in there, there's a lot of weighty decisions, and whatever council decides to do, you want to feel that you've taken the best decisions you can. So if it's agreed by members to have a period of adjournment so that consideration and perhaps discussion on what's been put forward can take place, or at least responses prepared, that would probably lead to a more effective debate than if we just wade through it. So if that's the will of the meeting, Provost, it's entirely in your gift to call an adjournment, and Councillor Douglas might want to know.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost, and I think an adjournment would be no bad thing. What I would say is there's a lot in Councillor Watt's motion, and we can write to everybody and anybody until we're blue in the face. The reality is we have a stark position here today, and I think the point that actually my comrade made earlier relative to what the NHS has put into this council undoubtedly has saved the NHS countless millions of pounds by doing the right thing by our people and keeping them out of hospital. When we are now faced with a financial black hole that we have today, what are NHS, Ayrshire and Arden doing to stump up some of the costs? This cannot just be borne out by council taxpayers here in East Ayrshire. But I find that ultimately we're in a situation where 6 months into the financial year, beyond that now, we have this black hole. Where potentially could this be going if left unchecked? Completely unsustainable. I think we should probably have a recess to consider what Councillor Watts has put forward, but I do want to make the point, we can write to everybody and anybody, but we have a situation that we have to deal with, and I think we need to task officers to come back with, because I don't think today is the day to make decisions on this potential savings without detail coming back. Lines on a paper are really not going to get us where we need to be. We need to have real solid answers, and I get that the proposal, and I fully support the proposal put forward by the leader of the council in terms of having that working group chaired by the chief executive to allow us to come back with detail. But I think before it becomes a political football and we end up wanting to write to everybody, we've got decisions we have to take. We'll have to take in January. Thank you, Provost.
Yep, no, thank you, Councillor Douglas. Just a couple of other people wanting to speak, and then we'll have a recess. Leader.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the points that Councillor Douglas makes are very valid, and I think the addition of that ask of Ayrshire and Arden, we know that their own finances are in a bit of a situation, but that's, as we can see here, it's having an impact on us and having an impact on our constituents. So there is an ask out there in terms of they must urgently look to their own finances, and that we need to have that difficult conversation with them, and I would support moves towards that end. I think in terms of any kind of motion, I think it's quite, we need to we need to keep it tight in terms of there's and punchy, and nobody duplicating the point. The other point that Councillor Douglas makes is absolutely valid as well. Whether I wouldn't have any strong objection to the three leaders writing a letter to Judge Swinney or the Health Secretary, but in terms of where that would get us, it would just be a kind of bureaucratic exercise, because we are seriously engaging the government through COSLA, and I'm pleased to report there was a united political position at COSLA that the 750 challenge to us is something that the meeting would. 2 weeks ago now, losing no track of time, but when it was £750 million in that challenge, the motion that we asked the government to meet that challenge, it was universally supported by all 32 leaders at COSLA. So I think that's probably, in terms of lobbying, we need to go strong there, but we need to agree totally, we need to look at some of the detail when that's brought back to us and just see what it looks like, but I also support the notion that we need to engage with Ayrshire and Arden directly about their contribution towards this.
Yep, thank you, Leader. A couple of other people want to speak. I will let you all have a recess so you can discuss. Councillor Jim Todd.
Thank you very much, Provost. Can you hear me okay?
And so.
Yeah, good, thanks. No, I agree with what the leader and opposition leader has said. There's a lot of issues that Councillor Watts raises, and a lot of them are legitimate. But I think it would be better that that task force that has to meet quickly and has to come up with recommendations before the end of January. I think that's the best route of travel, and Councillor Watts can put his input into that task force with all those recommendations that he's proposing. I would like to hope that the Chamber would accept that we'll leave it up to the task force to come out with the best recommendations for the situation we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely fair. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor David Richardson.
Thanks, Provost. A couple of wee bits of input from myself. Councillor Douglas, Barry makes the excellent point that, yes, these are issues that face East Ayrshire Council now. And I agree with Barry on that. So I think the setting up the body to look at these issues on, early in the new year is absolute paramount importance. I have read Councillor Watts' amendment just there on my phone. Don't disagree with anything that Councillor Watts has stated there, but I would maybe add an extra point if we're going to debate that motion today. And the point would be that if the Scottish Government does not have an extra £750 million from Westminster's allocated funds, that the First Minister make strong representations to Westminster for extra funding for this issue, because Scotland's natural resources, oil and gas, are continually being taxed heavily to the point where our population in Scotland should be receiving some benefit from that massive taxation that Westminster's receiving. Something along those lines. That's what I would, just one extra addition to Councillor Watts' proposal.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richardson. See folks scribbling. Leader.
I think that we want to be in a position today shortly that we can get something we all can put our hands to. There's a lot of bigger questions out there, and I just, in terms of who's responsible, in terms of the Scottish Government will tell us that they're not getting enough for Westminster and all that, and that game will play out in Cosla. But the important thing is for us, the East Ayrshire, is to absolutely make sure that our house is in order. Meanwhile, we continue to lobby as hard where we can locally, and that's with the Health Board locally, and continue to work with all the kind of national organisations, including COSLA, to make sure that we, because we've in terms of, we've got a really good, I suppose the bottom line is for me, we've got a really good track record in terms of performance governance, one that's hailed by government. It's really important that we are not punished as a council because, we've been able to be wise in terms of how we've been able to perform, and I would hope that we wouldn't have to suffer any financial consequences because we've been able to do that over the past years. Now that we're faced with absolutely difficult decisions to make.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks, Leader. Eddie.
Thanks, Provost, and I know Council's going to go to recess for discussions. Something I need to do, and it is reflected a bit. You know more than anyone, I'll understand the pressures in health and care, the consequences and risks around that. I'm the Chief Executive of the overall council, however, and if we don't take reductions in the health and care budget, we're going to have to take reductions somewhere else in this council budget. We can't walk away from here and say that's not too hard, because if it's too hard there, we're going to have to look somewhere else, for it. So while it's right to make all the considerations around health and care, there are also consequences if we don't take, the hard decisions around that too. And that's no easy, but it's just when we go to recess, I just think the full discussion has to be if we're not taking decisions, what's the consequence for the rest of the council has to also be brought into the discussions too.
Thanks, probably not to prolong things. I think first and foremost, before members move to adjournment, is absolutely right. I think everyone is clear that one of the strengths of the council has been the ability of all of our members to unite when required, when big challenges faces. Not to set aside the political differences that inherently exist when different political groups make up a political organisation, which is any council, but simply to accommodate those political differences within the discussions and determination of what is the best outcome for the council. and that is a proud track record, and it's appropriate you take that bit of time to see if that unity is there again. A couple other markers, as Eddie's touched on, as has been said, COSLA has already resolved to make a request of Scottish Government for additional funding. I think the 750 million figure was mentioned. Members, I think you all appreciate that while that is a fine outcome, and it's something that this council could also do in its own right and decide to do, the council's position is that we need to hope for the best, and if that funding comes, that would resolve matters, but we need to plan for the worst and the expectation that it may not come, and probably won't come, to be honest, in which case we still need to, as Eddie says, deal with the situation in front of us and cut our own cloth accordingly, unless and until any additional funding comes. To support, neither to support or negate the amendment, I think I would firstly just clarify, I think it simply seeks to add to what's there rather than negate anything that's already been proposed. So you're maybe not that far apart. The only other thing I would say as context in terms of the declaration of an emergency, I would certainly urge caution with that. Members will know themselves. A number of councils have stuck their toe in that water and declared climate emergencies, and the general response is, so what? Because nothing flows from it. It's not got any legal status. It doesn't mean the government are going to come in, or Audit Scotland will come in and take the problem and resolve it, or take over the running of the council. It doesn't have any status. It simply puts smoke. It just puts the greater attention on the situation. The other point to remember is, as has I think been recognised by a number of the contributors this morning, the problem here isn't unique. It's the same situation across Scotland. Does that mean 32 councils declaring health and social care emergencies? But most importantly, as Eddie says, what value would that add to addressing the situation and the issues, or the problem, if you want to call it that, in front of us? So there's just some thoughts there to help members to keep you, as you are, focused on the real matters here, which is there needs to be action taken to reduce the overspend, and there's measures proposed for that. The only other one, very, very briefly, is I don't know if it's happened, but if Councillor Watts could copy in, at least Julie, I've not got my machine here, but Julie, so we can have sight of the wording, and other than that, back to yourself, Provost.
Okay. No, that's great, David. We'll start to wrap up, but first, Councillor Peter Mabin.
Thank you, Provost, for letting me in. I appreciate your heading towards a recess. It's to discuss it more. It's a very complex issue. It's a complicated report that's in front of us. I don't know if we can simplify it for the members of the public that are out there, how dire a situation we are in. The members of the public watching this video, the great majority of them will not understand what an IGIB is and what the responsibilities they've got and how they've got to fund health and social care. The public just don't get this. But the members of the public out there will certainly understand what care packages are for friends and family. To help vulnerable people. They'll have aunties stuck at home getting carers visiting. They'll have people in care homes getting help. It's a dire situation. We shouldn't be withdrawing that support or reducing that support to our vulnerable people. In cash terms, I was looking at paragraph 31, which is a projected overspend of 4.27 million. I'm just wondering if we took a position where we said, no, we are not reducing the care provision to our vulnerable people out there, how much are we talking about? And if we can't get that money to fill that gap from Scottish Government or from somewhere else, and we're saying, no, we are not cutting that, we're not making these savings, how much would council tax have to go up to plug that kind of gap? This is the dire situation that we are in. We are making very, very difficult choices. Thank you, Provost.
Aye, no, for sure. Thank you. Leader.
Thanks. Hopefully we can get into a recess that can resolve things, something we can put our hands to. I think, Jim, the wording from COSLA in terms of the crisis, and I know there's other, I've seen Argyll and Bute crisis, I've seen them all replicated, and I agree with what David Mitchell's saying. I would be reluctant to go down that road. What COSLA is absolutely saying, there's a national crisis here, and East Ayrshire is absolutely 100% recognising that here today. And I think something along that's the right tone. There is a national problem, But we have local issues here as well, and that's what our task force has been tasked to absolutely look and make sure that the impact and other services of the council aren't impacted. And the point Eddie's making is absolutely valid too. So I think we'll look at the kind of wording. Hopefully we can get something that we can all sign up to, and I think that has more strength, as David and others have said. So.
Definitely. I think it's pretty clear that everybody's in the same mind, the direction we want to go and the right things to do. I've got two more people want to speak, and then I'll go to recess and MD with anything else afterwards. We can come back and discuss. I'll bring Councillor Jane Saxter in first, and then the last word from Joe McLaughlin.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to reiterate what my colleague Councillor Peter Maben was saying there about the general public and their understanding of what's going on here. I think people watching this are going to be pretty scared and pretty terrified for their family members, and that really concerns me. Just for example, I mean, around SDS budgets, is the plan to cut current SDS budgets? If somebody's got an SDS budget, are you planning to cut them?
You probably that would depend on the decisions that council took round about it. So if we change the eligibility criteria again, which is one of the things we've spoken about, then yes, that would be an actual outcome in there, that every single case, SDS and other, so basically every level of provision in there would have to be reassessed and reviewed again, and a potential outcome would be that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, I do apologise, I've been dinghying folks, so I'll bring in Councillor Claire Maitland. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Provost. It's just, I'd like Eddie, just before we go into recess, if you can just reiterate for us about recurring and non-recurring money on these cuts, and how we can't sit on underspend when people need some care. And I think that's important to bear in mind for all of us as we go into recess. Thank you.
So, what we're saying is, obviously, we've only got 3 months of, the financial year really left, in terms of that. So if we take decisions today that actually says we would cut our health and social care budgets by £10 million over 3 months, that would mean that actually as you enter into the new financial year, you would actually have made the equivalent of £40 million of cuts, if you think about it, because you've made a cut of 10 million in 3 months. The full year cost of that would be 40 million. So you would be doing significant harm in the short term to actually then almost certainly reinstate all that in a few months' time. And that was been previously mentioned, enter in with projected massive underspend. So if you actually, what we need to do is make sure we make what savings we can here, but enter into 26, 27 on a balanced budget. That would be a nonsense to enter into it with such harm that different members have spoke about to people in our communities, but then be sitting projecting massive underspends or reinstating a package a couple of weeks after you've actually taken a support package away. It doesn't take me away from the point of, and I'll keep coming back to, we need to actually reduce this spend within 25, 26. Otherwise, we need to come back here, and when Joe's going to come in and ask councillors to make other savings in other areas of the council to actually to bring in. So we need to reduce it, but we also need to be sensible and not reduce it in a way that actually overly harms people, and in a few weeks' time, like we're back then reinstating all that again.
Thank you. This is brutal. Joe McLaughlin, final word, and then we'll go to recess, members.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, members. And I just reiterate the point made by the Chief Executive, really important points to raise at this point. I suppose it's always bad for the finance person to come in at the end to give you the bleak side of the story. We don't have £10 million to provide the IGB this year, and that's why the proposal from the leader and the suggestion by the Chief Exec around taking a course of action that can go part way to find a solution for this year is really important. We are 9 months into this financial year. We are 9 weeks away from coming back into the chamber to set next year's budget, which by law you have to balance. Please have that in your minds too. In terms of the way you approach underspends, overspends and budgets, you always tend to look into the future. That's why in the budget strategy report you approved a few months ago, there is an option in there around council tax levels with a view to supporting the IGB with additional funding on a recurring basis. So you're almost ready for 2026, 2027. And going back to the Chief Exec's point, it's important we get a grip of the 2025-26 financial year. In terms of emergencies, climate emergency, housing emergency, social care emergency, the Chief Governance Officer makes the point particularly well, so what? But there's another dangerous point in this, and there's an accounting standard that when an obligation is made in public by an organisation that provides a reasonable expectation in a layperson's mind that a course of action will be taken, then an immediate liability in financial terms crystallises and you need to set aside the money. That point is made by Audit Scotland. It hasn't been taken to its logical conclusion by auditors, but I would seriously recommend or suggest that you do not declare a social care emergency because it leads to that so what question. But the point to leave you with, we don't have £10 million 9 months in, 9 weeks away, and you've already got a plan to support the IGB going forward next year. But it's about what we can do in 4 months.
Thank you very much, Joe. Council, on that note, we'll have a recess to allow discussions and everybody else to get something to eat and drink. So 30 minutes, 12:05, I'll see you back in the chambers. Thank you. Yeah. Fine. Before we move on to that, Councillor Richardson, apologies. I saw when I was walking out that you had your hand up. Was that a legacy hand or did you want to come in?
Thanks for coming back to me, Provost. No, I just wanted to add a wee bit to what Councillor Mabon, to what Peter said just before we stopped, if that's okay. Because Councillor Mabon quite rightly said, any members of the public listening to this today might not understand the nuances of the IGB being a partly funded council, NHS body that then provides care in the home, etc., all of that, and I got that, and that was a good point for Councillor Mabon to make. I just wanted to state that and I know not a lot of people tune into these, but there are some people that are very interested in local politics, and so that they understand the magnitude of East Ayrshire Council trying to fill a black hole of £10 million from its own resources. I do believe that a 1% rise on the council tax raises 750,000 approximately. Maybe Joe can keep me right on that figure if that's wrong, but I just wanted to mention that so that any member of the public tuning into this chat today realises just how big a task East Ayrshire Council filling a 10 million black hole would be, because 1% in their council tax only brings in 750k. Is that okay, Provost?
Councillor Richardson, absolutely fine, thank you, and noted. I appreciate that, thank you.
Is Joe okay with that figure, Claire?
Oh, wait, and I'll just check. It's twice I've negated you, Joe. Apologies. Joe?
Through you, Provost, yes.
Provost, just one other aspect to that, and it's not specifically in response to Councillor Richardson. It's not the first time the term's been used, but I would urge caution with members in describing this as a black hole. I absolutely understand all members. This isn't to... I understand all members will have their own view as politicians. I accept that, and those outside of us reporting and describing and commenting on this will have their own view. But a black hole might well convey that is something that's beyond the ability of this council to address and resolve, and you're not there yet. You have about to make a decision which will invite officers to go away and come back with a proposed solution. And I would just ask members to urge caution in describing and referring to what we're dealing with here. It is bad, it is challenging, but it's not insurmountable. And it is not the case at the moment that there is no deliverable solution. The detail just needs to be worked out and brought back to this council for approval. So it's not for me to tell members what language they can use, but I would urge caution when we're using terms like that. that's not necessarily the most appropriate description of the situation we're in, but everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Okay, thank you, David. Noted. So, members, following a recess, I'll just open it back up. Leader.
Thanks, Provost. Just while I'm filling my page here, can I just echo some of the comments, not just from David there, but I think other members of Councillor Sanford, Councillor Maben, Councillor Maitland, others, yourself. This is a challenge for us, but this council's had challenge before, and we've rose to them, and we've been able to work together, and that's where this council works at its best. So, we've got to be careful, because there's folk out there worried and will be anxious about this, people with care packages. So we really have to be really careful about not just, it's not about grabbing headlines, it's about working best, what's best for the folk in East Ayrshire. And hopefully the month ahead we'll see, given the series of measures that we're asking, including developing the task force, we'll stand up to that. And just one other thing, just in terms of I know that the task force will be underway, and it'll not be starting in January. I think somebody remarked it'll be starting in January. I can assure you it'll be starting about whenever this meeting finishes, and we'll get underway before Christmas. And I would just, I think we've had discussion with the Chief Executive, and I'd be happy just to confirm that political leaders will be involved within that process throughout its the duration of the task force. So I've now got a series. I've combined some the motions. So I'd my earlier motion just to get to start of this. So that. To add to the motion, the amendments that's down, I've already said that in terms of action points 7 and 10, that 10 that we'll have a task force chaired by the Chief Executive, Section 95 officer, Chief Governance officer, and the Chief Executive of the Health and Social Care Partnership, plus financial support officers to organise a task force and report back for us for the meeting of the 29th of January. And we've looked to them to make significant savings this financial year, bring us into balance for the new financial year with savings level of circa £4 million to get us to that balanced position. Added to that would be the point that Councillor Douglas made. It was in terms of the seeking cost sharing with the NHS, and I'll be covering that in the recommendation. So 12, I'd like to add an extension to point 12, and that's Council recognises that East Ayrshire faces challenges in delivering sustainable health and social care due to its rural geography and demographic change, and that Council believes that urgent coordinated action is required to safeguard the well-being of our communities and ensure equitable access to social care, and therefore resolves to further call on the Scottish Government to urgently ensure that sustainable funding is made available to local authorities and HSCPs to deliver integrated social care, deliver improved recruitment and retention of key workers, some support investment in early intervention, family support and community-led services to reduce demand in crisis care. Then call on the Scottish Government to urgently reassess the rural health and social care premium and national funding allocations, recognising that the higher costs and logistical challenges of service delivery in areas like East Ayrshire, recognising that action is needed to tackle inequalities across rural and urban Scotland, and further delegate the task force and support further development of local training pathways initiatives, partnering with colleges and NHS at Ayrshire and Nairn to create care apprenticeships and training for local residents to address recruitment and retention challenges in the health and social care workforce. Added to that, 13, seek cost sharing with NHS, Ayrshire and Arn in line with the integrated scheme. And then on to the recommendations that are in the paper. I think that's right.
Nicely summarised. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. I'd be happy to second the leader, but I think I would want to add in that we would direct the task force to look at ensuring we didn't make any cuts to existing care packages or support. I think we need to maybe just clarify that.
No, I missed that out. Thanks for that. We'll add that to the recommendations. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Graham Boyd.
Thanks, Provost. Just to comment on Eddie's last statement before the recess, really nailed it there. You know, we need to get this right and get a decision because it would impact on our budget. So he said it really well and succinctly, so support it, and I quite like where we're going with this as well.
No, perfect, thank you. Councillor Neil Watts.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, no, just to reiterate that I'm happy with those amendments and also the changes to my point 12.
We go there. Anybody else want in, or are we happy to go in the direction as stated? Agreed? Yep. Members, thank you very much. And thank you, Craig and officers, for your support on that paper. Members, we'll move on then to agenda item number 6, and it's the annual Treasury Management Report for 24-25 and mid-year update for 25-26. And I'll bring in Robin Baker. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, Provost. Good afternoon, members. Annual reporting of Treasury performance is a key requirement of the SITFA Treasury Codes of Practice, and this is an established report which goes first to governance and scrutiny and then comes here to Council for approval. It provides you with an annual look back at 24-25 Treasury activity and sets out a mid-year update for the current financial year. The report confirms Treasury activity has been conducted in accordance with the Codes of Practice, in particular in relation to borrowing and capital expenditure, that the key parameters of affordability, sustainability and prudence were met, and for our investment activity, those of security, liquidity and yield. Provost, a key point to highlight is that whilst the report shows that in both years the level of capital expenditure is below the approved estimate, resulting in lower borrowing requirements in each year, which are shown in tables 2 and 16 respectively, and result in lower capital financing costs in each year. This is due to the timing and rephasing of capital spend across several years and not a reduction in the total expected capital spend. As such, while some projects will reach completion in later financial years, the overall expenditure remains in line with the approved programme, and as such borrowing will still be at approved levels. This is important because as a result of this, it's not projected that there's any additional headroom within the programme to allow for further borrowing to support new projects. Provost, this position will be reviewed alongside the budget and the revised capital programme for 2026-27 and will inform the updated Treasury Management Strategy for that year when all 3 reports are brought back to Council in February next year. Provost, the recommendations are at paragraph 2 are to note the annual Treasury review for 2024-25 and the update position for 25-26. I'm happy to stop there and take any questions members have.
Robin, thank you so much, and as always, thank you for detailing it in a way that's palatable, easy readable. I don't know. Ian Linton.
Thank you again, Provost, and I thank Robin for presenting Council with a clear and concise summary of where we stand financially. I think given the significance of the earlier paper, this demonstrates well how we like to conduct our business here in East Ayrshire. So thanks, Robin.
Thank you, Councillor Linton. Councillor David Richardson. You're maybe still on mute.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Provost. Thanks, Claire. A question to Robin. Robin, when you talk about headroom, East Ayrshire Council's headroom for potential longer-term borrowing, is that headroom a figure set by East Ayrshire Council's financial department on its own? Or is that figure for headroom set by Audit Scotland or any outside body that regulates local authorities? For instance, where I'm coming from in this, Robin, is it a figure such as the Chancellor of the Exchequer may have for the national debt, whereby no matter which party's in, the maximum amount of borrowing on the national debt, they just basically change the figure as and when required when they want to borrow a wee bit more? So where I'm coming from is, are these limitations that we put on ourselves, or is this outside limitation by which it has a regulatory nature to it? Thanks, mate.
For you, Provost, it's a matter for the council to agree what's affordable to set aside for capital expenditure. So the limit is set by the council itself when they agree the Treasury Management Strategy each year, and it's based on the criteria of what's affordable, sustainable and prudent going forward. So it's a matter very much for the council, not an external factor.
Can I come back in that, Provost?
Yep, you can so.
That's absolutely brilliant, Robin. That's the answer I wanted to hear, and obviously I've got town centre redevelopment on my mind. So that's absolutely brilliant, and hopefully council will look at these matters in the future if it's within our control. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Members, anyone else want to come in? Are we happy to note the report? Perfect. Thank you very much, Robin. Moving on to agenda item 7, and I'll bring in Annika for the East Ayrshire Leisure Annual Performance Report for 24-25 and 5-10-year strategic framework. Thanks, Annika.
Thanks, Provost. I'm almost regretting not bringing in my usual music interlude into this meeting this morning. But instead of that, I'm pleased to give you a glossy version of our annual report for 24-25. It was approved at our AGM on 23rd of September. And again, it highlights all the excellent work that we do as a leisure trust, and I'm proud to present it to you. So I'm just going to pick up a couple of wee things, and then I'll move on to the second part of the report, which is about our new 10-year plan. So the trust during 24-25 outturned with a deficit of £30,000. This is the first time in 6 years that we have returned a deficit. But the main reason for that is the shortfall of income with the Palace and Grand Hall. So the shortfall of income in Palace and Grand Hall is £600,000 or thereabouts. So actually a deficit of £30,000 is within that context is very successful in my mind. We are, however, we don't like having deficits, so we have been working hard on that. The managers have worked really hard to get that in line. We've introduced new accounting practices for monitoring, and we are projecting a break-even this year despite the Palace and Theatre remaining closed. This has also had an impact on our attendances, which, if you compare it to the previous year, are down by 5.5%. Again, with the Palace Theatre being closed, that's not unexpected, and again shows growth in our other areas. The table at paragraph 8 shows our performance against our 10-year targets. We're only 5 years into those 10-year targets. They were set and based on a 2018 baseline, but they were set on a position that we'd like to see ourselves in 2030. So you can see from the targets we're already exceeding an awful lot of them and where we hope to be in 2030. Now you could say we were conservative when we set these in 2019, or in my view the teams have actually just done a really good job and surpassed all expectations. So that's our position for the 24-25 period. Looking forward and looking at our 10-year plan, we currently have a 10-year plan that takes us to 2030. However, with Vibrant Communities in the Galleon transferring over in April, catering in August, and then looking forward to Instrumental Music and Creative Minds coming in April, we needed to look at that 10-year plan. What I will say is this is in draft format right now. It's not been to the board for approval because we want to do a bit of engagement and consultation over it before we take it to board. I had hoped that we could do a tweak of the 10-year plan that we currently have. However, when we started looking at it and the services that transferred over, there's far too many opportunities for us not to just start again. So what you have in front of you is a new 10-year framework. It's got strong and ambitious objectives in it. They're outcome-led. Bums and seats are really important, but more important to us is the impact and the so what message. So they're going to be outcome-led. The plan will be underpinned by a measurement framework that looks at the outcomes and makes sure that we're measuring the impact throughout the 10 years. It's now going to be split, instead of into 6 themes, it's going to be split into 4 pillars. One that focuses on community, one that focuses on our creative industry work, one that looks at our commercial growth, and then the central services to support and underpin everything that we do. The 10-year framework will have a 3-year measurable action plan with it, and within that will have annual performance targets. We want it to be agile and flexible so that if through the year something's not working or we need to put interventions in, we have the agility to do that. So we're looking to work with the staff teams to get this to a final stage, take some consultation from key stakeholders in the community, and then take it to board early in the spring. But apart from that, Provost, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Annika. I like your glossy book. I like the music, but I like your glossy book. I'll open it to the floor. Leader.
Thanks. It's an absolutely excellent report, Annika. There's a lot of good things here for people. I particularly like there's 2 aspects I was just going to ask. I like your reference in your own statement about partnership working, because this is part of a wider leisure option, and I know that you've been really good in supporting other groups to widen the leisure offer right across the East Ayrshire. That's really to be good and to be encouraged. And also, just maybe more kind of topical, if I can refer members to page 10, you'll see a nice picture of the Tartan Army out at the Ayrshire Athletics Arena. I understand the kick-off times at 2 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the evening might be challenging, but I think it would be worthwhile exploring whether we could have another wider screen and fan zone for the people to enjoy it in a safe and secure way, subject to licensing. But something we could explore further. Thanks, Provost.
Lovely.
Just to confirm, Provost, we've already answered press inquiries, and the licensing and policy will permit that. So I'm sure boards the length and breadth of the country will be happy to look at late licenses for the matches.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Annika, for your report, and thank you very much indeed for putting in a picture of me that's at least 8 years old. That's much appreciated. This was pointed out by the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you. I think, to go back to your point, yes, we're carrying a deficit, but it's the first time, and to lose 600,000 income and have 30k as a deficit, I think has to be recommended. I would like to actually thank everyone that sits in the performance audit team, my colleagues behind me, etc. Thank you very much. And an ex-colleague of ours is the vice on that, and our vice chair, and that's Mr. Jim Roberts. So I have every confidence that every penny is counted in that measure. So just to say thank you very much. I look forward to seeing how the 4 pillars of wisdom work out over the next 11 years. So thank you.
Smashing. Thank you. Councillor Linda Maben.
Thanks, Provost. Again, just to reiterate what Councillor Maitland was saying, and to also say I've obviously been on the Leisure Trust since 2022, so slightly less time than some of the others, but it's been a journey. It's been a very, very interesting journey. There's been a lot achieved. I really look forward to the next few years, because I think every challenge that has been thrown at them, they have managed to overcome. And I think the next few years will be very, very interesting. But can I just say that I'm no Linda Holland anymore, so can you can you get your shiny brochure updated, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Boyd.
So again, Provost, I'm also on the board as well, and it's a role I've really enjoyed. It's been great working with the Leisure Trust, and all the projects coming together, and just all the things we're doing are excellent. Really got an interest in the Palace Theatre and the development there, and pleased to see some as I get invited to see around next week. Just a small point. It was closed for too long, and that's maybe had an impact on the income. Maybe Annika can comment on that. And on a positive, it's good to see the Dick Institute's now open on a Sunday, and I've had a few constituents contact me, hoping there's better access to the children's library. I'm sure that can be done, and hopefully we can open that Monday. So overall, it's all looking good in terms of Leisure Trust, just like what my colleagues on the board said there.
No, thank you. Annika, would you want to come back in on the point Councillor Boyne made?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Provost. The Palace Theatre has been closed longer than the contractor's been on site, as you pointed out. That was to do an awful lot of investigative survey work, and when you see on the site, you'll notice there's a lot of floors up, lots of walls punched through. So there was a lot of investigation work that we had to do before the contractor was on site, and that was to minimise the programme at this stage. But it's great to have them on site now. What I think they really regret when I go on site and my team go on site, because they keep on finding really lovely features and we won't let them cover them up again. So I think that's something that they're trying to avoid, us being on site as much as possible. In terms of the Dick Institute, we're doing that as a pilot right now to get it open on a Sunday. It's been well received, it's busy. The cafe's busy on a Sunday as well, but it's our intention to open 7 days a week from April of this year.
No, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Ian Linton.
Thanks again, Provost. And I think in response to the point that Councillor Boyd made, I think Annika and her team have come up with an excellent solution in that the hoardings round the Palace Grand Hall now give much more detail as people go past of how the project's going to look when it's completed. And I think that's going a long way to addressing, the inconvenience that we've all had to work round about with that. There's something worthwhile coming at the end of it. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
No, for sure. Thank you. Councillor William Lennox.
Thank you, Provost. Just thanks, Annika, but on a lighter note, my grandwains have been asking me if the Starry Nights thing's going ahead this year because they haven't had their invitations. Can you go ahead?
Through you, Provost, no, Starry Night is not going ahead this year. The way it has been run for the last couple of years with an external event company caused a lot of disturbance to the park and to our neighbours. So we've decided to take a wee pause from it for a couple of years, and then we are working on our own Christmas festival in future years, probably not next year, but the year after that, where we'll do something in-house with our new events team that is more affordable to local people, less disruptive to our neighbours, and keeps the business locally.
Okay, thank you. I suppose just for myself, Annika, during the year it was a privilege to be the chieftain of the first edition festival for the Robert Burns World Federation, and we had one of the events in the Dick Institute. We had Burnsians from all over the world coming along, and they were really, really impressed with the Dick Institute. We have some incredible things like the printing press and the original manuscript of Tam O'Shanter, and it was amazing to see people flying all over the world to come to Kilmarnock to see that. And we've just heard that they're going to be coming back to Kilmarnock next year, which is lovely. So testament to the work you have done and for putting out all the stops for our international visitors. Thank you. Anyone else like to come in? No. Okay, are we happy with the report? Okay, that's great. Thank you, Annika. Members, moving on, you'll know that we have reallocated addendums 8 and 9 to January. So we'll move on swiftly to item 10, which is East Ayrshire Antisocial Behaviour Strategy for 26 to 31. And I'll bring in Blair Miller to go through the report. Blair, there you are.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, members. Members, the report is to seek approval of the draft antisocial behaviour strategy, which is provided at Appendix 1, and the proposed consultation programme towards formal adoption by the end of this financial year. In terms of background, members, the report sets out the legal obligations on local authorities in relation to dealing with antisocial behaviour and the wider UK and Scottish legislative context, including, members, at paragraph 14, the Scottish Government's 2009 framework to ensure prevention and early intervention is the approach used rather than widespread use of enforcement measures. And I would direct members to paragraphs 15, which sets out the findings of the Independent Working Group on Antisocial Behaviour, which was reported earlier this year, which recommends strategic, multi-partner approaches, again, focusing on prevention and early intervention and support for all of those affected by antisocial behaviour. In line with the national position, locally, we firmly recognise that antisocial behaviour is a complex and multifaceted issue, influenced by someone's individual circumstances and vulnerabilities, including their mental health, experience of deprivation, trauma and social supports. The Council's antisocial behaviour team, alongside partners, as set out at paragraphs 22 to 26, works proactively to prevent escalation of behaviours using a wide range of actions to resolve incidents as part of this strong partnership approach. Members, in terms of key stats, in the last 5 years, we've seen a 14% reduction in the average number of antisocial behaviour incidents reported to Police Scotland, an expansion of the Council's antisocial behaviour team in 2022, and that well over 80% of the incidents reported to the Council's antisocial behaviour team are caused by people aged over 16. The strategy recognises that antisocial behaviour requires a partnership approach to achieve its vision of the East Ayrshire Community Plan. At paragraph 37, members, I set out the 4 priority actions that are at the core of the antisocial behaviour delivery plan, which are to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour and the fear of crime and antisocial behaviour, working with young people to reduce being involved in crime and antisocial behaviour, improving community safety in our neighbourhoods and our homes, and promoting child protection and the safety of vulnerable adults. Members, these priority actions firmly recognise the need to work in a trauma-informed way, focused on prevention and intervening early, and robust enforcement where necessary and where it meets those noted thresholds. The report then turns to children and young people in the antisocial behaviour context from paragraphs 40 to 47, setting out that a range of actions can be taken to help resolve reported incidents within the legal framework of the Children's Rights, GIRFEC and the Promise, and the arrangements that are in place locally to uphold our corporate and partnership responsibilities to our children and our young people. I would draw members' attention to paragraphs 47 in particular, that recognises the importance of action to prevent escalation because of the detrimental impact more serious acts of criminality or disorder has on individuals and communities. Paragraphs 48 and 49 set out the role of enforcement action under the National Antisocial Behaviour Guidance, and the report describes how success will be measured through this delivery plan. Highlighted at the bullets at paragraph 52, alongside the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, members. Members, a 4-stage consultation plan has to date and will continue to be used to ensure all stakeholders who play vital roles in tackling antisocial behaviour have their say in the strategy and its delivery, and this is set out at paragraph 55. In terms of the next steps, paragraph 58 asks for members' consideration as to should the Council wish to use powers for antisocial behaviour orders for children and young people aged under 16, that a clear threshold will be necessary in the serious and persistent cases where this tool could be used, and that proceeding with this application of this tool requires the approval of all key agencies listed at paragraphs 59 for it to be successful. Finally, the delivery of the strategy will be supported by an operational review to ensure that an appropriate level of senior management challenge and engagement in multidisciplinary working is effective. The implications are at paragraphs 62 to 70, with the recommendations at paragraph 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Blair. Councillor Barry-Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Blair, for the report. First of all, I think it would be incumbent us all to note the work of the team, particularly Craig Ferguson, the team manager there, who I think has made a real difference in terms of this council's approach. A couple of comments, a couple of points I wanted to raise. Actually, on the paper beforehand, which we weren't considering today, but of course couldn't help but notice in terms of other local authorities' antisocial behaviour strategies, and it surprised me the number that have none. You know, there's nothing there. That's just seems unbelievable to me. And I'm glad that we have something here bespoke to East Ayrshire within the parameters of the legislation. A couple of things here in terms of children and young people. I think, and I've said this before, I don't really want to criminalise any young person where we can avoid it. But I feel we are absolutely letting the young people out there down if they don't realise there are consequences sometimes for their actions. So I know what Blair has said in the paper around ASBOs, but there has to be consequences if you're going to commit antisocial behaviour. A particular point I want to discuss, and I'll point to, and it's certainly in terms of the legislation as set out in 2004, paragraph 11 and page 283, in terms of noise nuisance. Now, Blair will know to what I'm referring to, but I'm not going to expand upon it in terms of any particular addresses or locations. Dog noise. I understand certainly the complexities around this in terms of dogs and animal noise can't be considered in terms of antisocial behaviour legislation. But Blair, I don't know if perhaps it's something we need to ask of government, is that where dogs and animals are being used to deliberately cause antisocial behaviour, where we could look further at how legislation could tackle that. The legislation now is 21 years old and the world has moved on. You know, potentially people online, you know, are using social media, could be acting antisocially in a way that, of course, wouldn't have been envisaged in 2004. So I just want some comment around that, Blair. But I, again, just wanted to thank you for bringing this forward. And when you look compared to many other local authorities, it's quite interesting that so many don't have or have out-of-date reports for their areas. I find it astounding, to be honest. But if you can give me some commentary on the particular points I raised. Thank you, Blair.
Through you, Provost. You're absolutely right. Society has evolved since 2004 quite significantly, and what we've tried to capture as part of this review is that strategic change that there has been, and I made reference to a number of changes that's occurred in and around this environment of antisocial behaviour since that. So I recognise that there may be gaps within the legislation. There are ongoing discussions about a wider and updated review of the strategy, and I would be happy, and given Craig Ferguson's role, who you referenced earlier, who is the chair of the National Antisocial Behaviour Officers Forum Group, to ensure that we feed back any comments on that we have a strong influence in shaping what that future direction might look like. In regards to the matter of dogs specifically, you know, the noise monitoring equipment that we had previously, we had its gaps in terms of its success at court. However, I may bring in David Mitchell in that regard, around about that wider enforcement piece. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Provost. I think just quickly, there's three different aspects to this. There is statutory nuisance, which is covered by the Environmental Protection Act 1990, and that's when environmental health, they deal with statutory nuisance. That is noise of any source, and it's not just loud noise, it might be low pitched repeat vibration. That has regard to the source of the noise, the type of the noise, the impact of the noise on the recipients, and that's where it's deemed to meet a threshold whereby it's harmful, deemed could potentially harmful to health, and that's where the environmental health harm comes in. Not every source of noise and not every noise issue meets the statutory nuisance criteria. Specifically, before we're identifying gaps in legislation, just to remind all members that there is also the process by which if a person is affected by a neighbour's dog barking, it may well be that it won't, in most cases, meet and be evidenced to meet the statutory nuisance threshold, but there is a process whereby anybody can make application to the Justice Court looking for an order to regulate the control of the neighbour's dog. So there is a process that folk, and I know folk don't necessarily want to get themselves involved, but it's important to understand that we use the powers we have, but if there are other options, it's not always unreasonable to expect people to utilise them. So there is a separate process for dog noise. In terms of dogs featuring in antisocial behaviour. It can happen. There's multiple scenarios. Certainly dog fouling is in one of the indicative examples. Clearly anything there where aggressive and threatening behaviour, if somebody's threatening you with a dog, it would still constitute antisocial behaviour. So we absolutely deal with the situations we can, but as I say, there are different options there depending on the noise scenario and what particular type of noise and source of noise and what's the impact. And I've set out, as I say, with statutory nuisance, and that's not just about noise. Statutory nuisance is anything that's harmful to health. It might be gases, it might be anything that's emitting. Noise is just part of that. Noise nuisance or noisy dogs has its own process, and anything else where dogs are involved in anyone who's committing antisocial acts would be dealt with in the same way, whether they're threatening somebody with a dog or a big stick.
Yeah, that okay? Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Councillor Graham Boyd.
Thanks, Provost. There's a quote in the paper, it's been postponed, an enforcement paper. I take issue with a wee bit, and it said, what does and does not work in tackling antisocial behaviour? Strong evidence suggests that purely punitive and deterrent measures are not effective in reducing ASB in young people and adults, and maybe even counterproductive. There's no reference, there's no source. I challenge that. I think there's definitely some elements, you know, but I don't think that's the only case. There's a bigger picture here, and it's Scottish Government policy. Scottish Government policy, it all comes, antisocial behaviour all comes from trauma and neurodiversity. That certainly is not the case. And if you want to give me a chance, I'm going to tell you a wee story. But my experience, it might take a few minutes, right? Because all youth and adult antisocial behaviour is influenced by schooling, because we all go to school at the start of our life. So I'm going to take you back, and I'll take a few minutes here to 1990. I started teaching, age 23. I had a full mop of dark hair, probably looked really young. Sent to Greenwood Academy, because probation was different then, to fill a gap for PT leave, and it was really difficult, challenging classes. There was one third year bottom science class. The issue wasn't science, it was territorial. Butcher Hill, Dreghorn, Springside, who was running the show. I couldn't get them to stop talking when I was in the room. They wandered about the room, poking and prodding at each other, winding up each other. If I asked them to leave the room, they'd just come back in. It wasn't stereotypical riots as such, more crowd control, the line table act. If I'm honest, there wasn't a great deal of learning done in that classroom. Certain times of day, Thursday afternoon was really difficult. The weather, when the rain and wind was blowing, really difficult. I was doing everything I should, prepared lessons at the door to welcome classes. It didn't matter. Yeah, the experienced teacher across the corridor didn't have these issues. I thought, what am I doing wrong? Soul searching. I actually thought quite a few times of jacking it in, as many student and new teachers do due to classroom management, but I persevered. The issue I had was inexperience, and this is the key to this. Teenagers are very perceptive. They'll pick up on weakness and softness and take advantage. I've got a sixth sense. Thinking back, it would be my body language, probably looked a bit nervous, indecisive.
Councillor Boyd, sorry, but through the Provost, I appreciate,
I
think there's a couple of points would need to be made. One, everything you've referred to so far would appear to be in the context of the classroom and school discipline. And clearly there would be no suggestion of using and applying any aspect of the Council's antisocial behaviour strategy within the classroom. And the second point would be, as you delineated yourself, the experience you're referring to precedes the legislation by some 13 years. So on behalf of the Provost and in the interest of the effective conduct of the meeting, it would be helpful if you were able to make a comment that was of relevance to the paper in front of us.
Right.
I appreciate you need to set context, but within reason, I would think.
Well, that is the context, you know, so it was really difficult. And what I'm saying is, and I will cut it short, I didn't have presence. And that's a really important thing. And there was one issue, because I'm going to use this as a correlation. There was a drum pin put in my seat at one period several times, and I couldn't stop it. And anyway, it was because I was seen as weak, and the drum pin kept appearing in the seat. I couldn't do much about it. Anyway, Easter came, and I left. I went to Auckland Academy in Mainholme in North Ayr, and it was becoming much easier, because subconsciously I was gaining presence. that incident with the drum pin never happened again. And this is a key, David, I'm trying to get to. Yes, there is trauma in neurodiversity with the antisocial behaviour issue, but if we're going to solve this problem, we have to look at the bigger picture. The problem is the Scottish Government. They're eroding boundaries and consequences in schools and society. Councillor Douglas mentioned consequences. We know the police hands are tied by legislation, and so are teachers. We hear the police, they take the offending youth home and they're back out before them. Just to finish up, the drum pin isn't in my seat. It's in the seat now of police and society. The police and partners don't have the same presence. Many adults and youths who have come through the school system take full advantage, just like what happened to me. I'm quite clear about that. I've seen it. I've worked with thousands of teenagers. I see things out in the street that could easily be solved, and it's because of weakness coming from the Scottish Government. It's quite clear.
Okay, Councillor Boyd. As a councillor, can I just check that you're saying that neurodivergence does not go towards misbehaviour?
No, I didn't. I said neurodivergence and neurodivergence is a factor, but it's not all. There's a lot of kids who will take advantage. Neurodiversity is an issue. See, back then, it was dyslexia when I started. Neurodiversity wasn't on there, but neurodiversity is an issue. But a lot of kids will join in and take advantage. I've seen it. I've taught thousands of kids. I see it.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. As a neurodiverse person myself, thank you. Right, I've got a list of some people. Next, Councillor Jane Sangster.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Blair, for this. I just want to reiterate Councillor Douglas's comments regarding Craig Ferguson and his wider team. I think they do some amazing work, and I want to give credit to them. They actually do some amazing work. I've been to community councils where we've had issues, and they've then come back a few months later to say thank you so much, because those antisocial behaviour issues are now decreasing with the help of the police. Just with regards to page 292 and paragraph 59, you know, round about the kind of multi-agency working, I'm really pleased to see that. And obviously Police Scotland aren't here to comment, but perhaps maybe Linda or Marion could come in and give us a wee bit more detail of how the school and social work kind of work together as teams in tackling the kind of antisocial behaviour that obviously, because there's probably antisocial behaviour occurs in schools, but also out with school, which gets then reported back to head teachers, etc. So I think it might be quite nice to hear how that kind of multi-agency approach is working with you guys, and how you are working together with that. Thank you.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. Marion?
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Sangster. The number of children that are involved in this type of behaviour is actually a small number, and it's a reducing number, which we need to reflect on. And if my colleague from the Scottish Children's Support Administration was here, she'd give you the numbers on that, and in terms of what's been referred to the Reporters Department. How we work together is through the Scottish approach around whole systems, and there are a number of strands to the whole systems approach, but it's absolutely predicated on joint working, early intervention, and supporting young people at the earliest possible point to desist from this type of behaviour and understand the consequences for communities, but also for them in the longer term. So it is really key in terms of joint working, and we have a whole systems group that meets on a regular basis, supported by local partners, but also national partners as well, such as Centre for Youth and Criminal Justice at Strathclyde University, and colleagues from Scottish Government as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That okay?
Yeah, that's great, and thanks for pointing out, because I should have probably made that point as well, that in terms of young people, in terms of antisocial behaviour, I think we can all agree that they are in a minority, and I think the majority of young people out there, from what I witness visiting schools, etc., are actually really good kids. So, you know, just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Oh, an important point, thank you. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks very much, Blair, for the paper and statistics that is around that paper. There's been a lot of work to bring this back to us, and as Councillor Douglas had said, no every authority is in the position we are in. Blair, you mentioned trauma and ACEs, and I'm delighted that approach has been taken. I think sometimes when I listen to Councillor Boyd and the focus on this small, and I know it's a small minority that creates antisocial behaviour, I don't know what grievance, and it would appear there is a grievance that Councillor Boyd has when he keeps focusing on the 16 or 14% of our children that's attributable to. I don't hear or ever hear him talking in public round about the antisocial behaviour that's in our town centres with the adults that's coming out the pubs or in the schemes through the week where the parties are ongoing all the time. I just cannot accept and continually accept and sit here and listen to Councillor Boyd talk with focus. He maybe doesn't fully understand what trauma is or what the experience of trauma was. I was probably one of the kids that you could have taught in Greenwood Academy. So you need to understand where you're pointing that finger and the accusations about punitive measures that you're advocating. It could have serious impact going forward for young children. They become the adults and they could be part of that in that revolving door that's in and out of prison all the time. Looking for actions, yes, and I get that the public want consequences. In this paper, I think it's been set out that we'll work with partners and it's run about early intervention. The big focus should be on early intervention and no on punitive actions at the end. Parents have got the role to play in this as well. That's been set out in the paper. Let's focus on the heavy side. It's some of the stuff they said. We spoke about dogs and the antisocial behaviour that comes with that. We're now getting washing machines at night because cheap rate electricity says let's put our washing machine on at night. So you've all sorts of these things, these different things. It's suiting our schemes every day of the week. But for Councillor Boyd, it seems to be continually, whether it's the police, fire and rescue, whether it's in the chambers in here, but it's a continual focus on our young people. And I can't sit here and accept it. I know the percentage of people out there that are not attributable to antisocial behaviour, but the children do not and ever get the credit they deserve in the wider public. They get it in this chamber at times, but never, ever enough.
Fine. Thank you. In an effort to move on, I will come back to you, Councillor Boyd. Okay, I'll give you the opportunity. But I just have a list of folk. Councillor David Richardson online.
Thanks very much, Provost. Thanks, Claire, for letting me in. I'll be brief because I know a lot of people want to speak in this. I just want to go back to the conversation that happened between Councillor Douglas Barry and David Mitchell, which I thought was quite interesting because I've had a number of cases myself with regards to animals and noise. I actually think these cases are on the increase, and I've had cases regarding dogs which were difficult and we weren't probably able to resolve. But I've also had cases where I think the cost of living's got an effect on this, because we're now going back to the days probably just after the war where people, for instance, maybe kept a cockerel and 3 or 4 hens in their back door. And then that all died away because people became more affluent. Times were good. You've never had it so good, as the politicians of the time said. And keeping animals in your back door for fresh eggs in the morning sort of disappeared because everybody was able to go to the supermarket and buy those fresh eggs. Now, we're back in the days where people are keeping a cockerel and a few hens out their back door because having the fresh eggs in the morning is saving them a couple of quid, and that couple of quid has become important again. So these cases are going to be in the increase, because the case I had 3 neighbours on the one street. Cockerels are, traditional. The break of dawn, they're doing the cockle-doodle-doo, as it were. And basically this cockerel was waking up half a street. But the animal itself isn't behaving out with its natural instincts. When daylight breaks, a cockerel's going to make some noise. So the animals get rights, but then the people in the street have got rights to having a lie in until their alarm goes off. So these cases are very, very difficult cases. And I heard where David Mitchell was coming from. I mean, the council's only got so much power, and then it's down to the individuals if they want to take it through the civil courts. But then that's maybe going to bring with lawyers' fees, etc., etc. So they're very, very difficult cases. And my point is, I think with the cost of living crisis happening, we might see more and more of these cases arising, because it's becoming it's like the programme, I don't know if you remember it, for the 70s and 80s. There's more folk out there are having to live like they did in the good life and have a few animals out their back door. But that's just the point I wanted to make. They are difficult cases, the ones that revolving around animals.
Thank you, so Councillor. You really got me when you said cock-a-doodle-doo. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to respond to that. Thank you. Councillor James Adams.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important we don't demonise young children or indeed cockerels in the context of the conversation. No, my point was really from the paper that we haven't looked at. It was from the APSI report, and it did mention and strayed into the boundaries of antisocial behaviour. And indeed, there was a quote in it, it's not mine, it's low quality means high cost, and that was W. Edwards Deming that I recalled from my days as a student. Now, it highlights within that paper that none of the budget we had was spent in publicity campaigns. Now, Councillor McMahon highlights the fact that there's early intervention is required, and I think that's absolutely valid. We need to reduce the environmental impacts that include antisocial behaviour, and things that are high in the list of my constituents include littering, dog fouling and fly tipping, and they constitute antisocial behaviour, of course. As an organisation, we had a very low number of fixed penalty notices issued through the last years. Those are not my words, those are from the report. And of course, fixed penalty notices would act as a deterrent against environmental crimes and indeed antisocial behaviour. The report highlights levels of fly tipping escalated during the pandemic, which again, I don't like using that as an excuse, but the key point is they remain high today. And we saw an increase of 41.13% last year in fly tipping. There's a lack of education and enforcement around street cleaning, fly tipping and littering. And what that really means is, to go back to my earlier point, is low quality means high cost. If we don't address the root of the problem, which is people thinking it's acceptable to dump litter, to dog fowl, it costs us more in the context to address that. And if we've discussed it earlier today in the chamber, we're not awash with funds. We need to start taking action, and that hopefully in the long run would save us money. Thank you.
Yep, no, some fair points, thanks. Do you want to come back in? Are you okay? Yep, okay. I've got your name, don't worry. Okay. Councillor Neil Ingram.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I was just reflecting that on our approach and echo Councillor McMahon's words. That proactive approach, that early intervention is so important. We need to treat our children as individuals, as not as a collective group. And I don't know how many times we need to go back over the point that it's close to 90% that adults are committing antisocial behaviour. So to continually go back to a minority group and point the finger at them, children learn behaviour, and whether or not that's due to trauma or whether or not that's due to the adults in their life not giving them the tools that they need, then we need to be aware of that and how we approach this issue. And I'm glad to see, like I said before, and as Councillor McMahon has said, the way that we're going about it. So thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. David?
Thanks, Rob. It's just not to prolong things, members, but just to give a little bit of context to some of the commentary that's been made. I would remind members of the paper that was considered in this council in this chamber a year ago, which set out the council's littering strategy. We've had the cockerels, might as well have the gulls back. And in that context, we set out how we would seek to manage the problem, which included a whole refreshed approach to the media messaging, that the people who are complaining about the gulls attacking them may well be the people who are putting the food out that attracts the gulls in the first place. and that has been implemented. Members have commented throughout the subsequent 12 months on different occasions in the Chamber on the success of that and the improvements that's seen. We've had positive comments, and as other councils go chapping the door of Nature Scot, begging for culls of gulls, Nature Scot are pointing to this council's example as an example of best practice in that area and commending the approach that you approved in this chamber 12 months ago as best practice to try and take that proactive management approach and trying to reduce the source of the food that attracts the gulls. So the point that was being made about increased messaging and all that was actually the action we took in the back of the last paper and will continue to take. In terms of how it all joins up, this is the antisocial behaviour strategy. This invites council's approval to start a consultation. We will need to consult far and wide. I don't think there's reference in there, but that'll include the sheriff principals at the two courts, because we need to be clear if we're putting ASBO applications into their courts, what their response and view of that's going to be, as well as all the other partners, including the Children's Rights Commissioner, because there's no point having them coming in to intervene in action. We've seen recently in the back of the introduction of the UNCRC a case where two 17-year-olds sought a judicial review of the Lord Advocate's decision to prosecute them for their offences, and all of that needs to be factored in. In terms of how it all joins up, the other papers will be coming back to council in a short time at the end of January, and that will look at how the council, out with the actual specific powers under the Act, can perhaps further improve on the current offer and the current approach by bringing, as was proposed in the paper that you will see shortly again, to bring the relevant services under the one banner of preventative services and to look at how we can do better again. Doing better doesn't always mean we're doing badly. It simply means we recognise we're under a statutory duty to continuously improve, however well we're doing at any point in time.
Right, thank you, David. Councillor Sally Cogley online.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to reiterate earlier comments about Craig and Craig's team, Craig Ferguson. So thank you very much for all of your input, Craig. We've been asked to approve the draft strategy and the proposed consultation. Now, as far as the draft strategy is concerned, one of the founding points for this is the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2004, and a very important sentence in this, endorsed by the 2025 Working Group, is that the strategy has to be drawn up in conjunction with the relevant Chief Constable. To what extent has the Chief Constable been involved in this draft strategy? And then my second point, as far as the consultation is concerned, I see that has to have been completed by the end of this financial year. What form is that consultation going to take? Who's going to be involved? How are we going to carry that out? And to what extent are we as elected members going to be involved? Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Sally. Blair?
Through you, Provost. So the Chief Inspector of Police will be one of our key and statutory consultees to help shape the final strategy that will return to members. So they will have their place through that forum. In terms of engagement, as we do with all types of engagement, it will take lots of different forums. Social media will write to specific groups like we've identified, including Sheriff Principal, as David referenced. And we will be writing out to particular groups and ensuring that we have the voice of children that help inform and shape the final strategy that you see before you when that's ready.
Thanks, Blair. Is that okay, Councillor Cogley?
No,
Yep.
if I could just come back in on that. No, could you be a little bit more specific about what the consultation, what form the consultation will take, please? Because it's a fairly short timescale that we're looking at.
Through you, Provost. So we will write to interested groups that we've noted within the paper. We will have an online consultation which will be available to all members of our public, and we will seek the views of children to help shape the policy. So we'll use a range of measures, as we always do, to capture and ensure that it's wholly comprehensive what we bring back.
I think it just as says, the consultation will be to invite comments on the draft strategy that you've been asked to approve for the purposes of consultation, which is set out in the appendix to the report. So it's not an open, what do you think we should be doing? It's inviting comments from all the consultees listed, and local members have been entitled and invited to comment as well on the content of the draft strategy. so that we can bring those consultation responses back and invite council to approve the final strategy in light of those comments. Given that the points been made and raised by a number of councillors, and the Act does give the Chief Constable specific reference in terms of in conjunction with him, everyone else are consultees, but it's in conjunction with them, the Chief Constable. If council's agreeable, I think it would be appropriate to extend an invite to the appropriate representative of the Chief Constable to attend that further meeting so that they're on hand to give any views required at the meeting, recognising that council may have questions for others. I wouldn't invite all the consultees, but recognising the Chief Constable's got particular status. If you are willing, then we can extend the invite so that they would actually be present in chamber when you consider the report back on the outcome of the consultation.
Yep, thanks, David. Is that okay? Yeah, you can come back.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, if you're saying that the consultation is really commenting on the content of the strategy, I would have thought that the Chief Constable should actually have been involved in formulating the strategy as per the requirement of the Act. Thank you.
I believe there were at least some discussions with some of the partners informally. The steps are set out in the report, step 1, step 2. The formal consultation with all parties, including the Chief Constable, for formal comment on the emerging draft strategy is at stage 2. But the draft strategy you have in front of you absolutely reflects the police view as expressed to colleagues in their ongoing operational arrangements. I believe, I'm not quite sure the status, I wasn't present, but I know there have been meetings and meetings have been referred to with other partners that have informed the strategy, but I'm sure Blair can confirm that. Draft strategy, sorry.
Through you, Provost, I'm happy to confirm that through the current Chief Inspector and who's shared the view on behalf of Police Scotland that we have had early conversations round about the shaping of this strategy with particular focus in areas that we've discussed in the Chamber this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Is that okay, Councillor Cogley?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, sure, but thank you. Councillor Jim Todd.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'd like to respond to Councillor Boyd's comments. I think it all comes down to perceptions, because Councillor Boyd's blaming the Scottish Government for all the ills with young folk in the present time. I'd like to, he took us back for a wee while. I'd like to take us back for a wee while to when I was at school, and there was no Scottish Government then. We were controlled in education terms by Strathclyde Regional Council, which was a Labour council. And that was a time in the 70s of the teacher strike, teacher shortage. I didn't have a physics teacher, so I didn't get a physics O grade because I didn't have a physics teacher for 2 years. Perceptions then were there was a lot of antisocial behaviour with young folk, and it was some serious issues. Further on, after a career in the Navy and then got my own boys, went to school. I was lucky enough to be on the school board, the parent councils, or through the late 80s into the 90s. And there was a lot of antisocial behaviour then with young folk. There was no Scottish Government then. So it all comes down to perception. There's a photograph across from your office, Provost, and it's a photograph of 2 young boys down in Dunmelton. And I was contacted by some friends, and these 2 boys were into a lot of trouble. And through working with some of my mates, we got an old motorcycle, went down there. These 2 boys went through all the checks and balances. My mate went through PVG, and those 2 young boys were engaged in fixing that bike, and they used it in the bings. And the reply, what I got back this was 10 years ago, right enough, but the reply I got back was those 2 young boys were diverted from the bad route, and I believe that they're working now good jobs. So young folk need that wee help up. They've just went through a terrible time of disengagement with the world. We don't know what's going on in their lives at home. We don't know what type of lifestyle they're living, what they're trying to get dragged up, kicking and screaming. And I think it's beholden on us all to show that support. Absolutely point out that there is a reaction to some of their practices, but we need to guide young folk. We need to guide them and hopefully get them into society that they can contribute to. But demonising young folk all the time for all the else is wrong. I'd be pointing the finger to what's going on in the world. The world's in a terrible state. That's no young folk that's caused that. Thanks, Provost.
Yep, okay, thank you, Councillor Todd. David, you want in?
Very quickly, Provost, just to urge all members to bear in mind that this isn't an either or. It's not early intervention and prevention versus harsh consequences and a big stick. It's all of it. It's about early intervention and prevention for those who need it and who will benefit from that, tempered with the recognition in terms of the wider public safety aspects and the recognition that in that very small minority of cases there may be a need to take some further action to protect the wider public. It's not about demonising anyone. It is about that public safety aspect and what is the acceptable level of risk that if anyone's behaviours go unchecked and unchallenged, that there's a greater harm to folk. But the main point I would wish to make and remind all members is it's not either or, it's not one over the other. It is all of those measures need to be part of the overall approach in order to do the best we can for all members of your communities.
Thanks, David. Councillor Boyd.
Thanks, Provost. Just to respond to some of the points. First, Councillor Todd, I really appreciate the way Councillor Todd put his points across, quite eloquently and very well. Councillor McMahon clearly was an attack on me. That's fine. As I said last time, it's political debate in chamber. It's absolutely fine. Just to get a couple of points, neurodiversity and trauma, I have made it quite clear these are factors, but they're not all the factors. I've seen it in classrooms and with young people. And I will also emphasise that the majority of young people behave extremely well. And with Councillor McMahon's point, yes, quite clearly there is adult antisocial behaviour. There's big problems there as well with the examples he brings up. But all these adults were teenagers and were at school at one point. You know something? Everybody's an expert because they went to school. And I'll tell you something, see the teachers I know and teachers I've worked with, they get fed up with politicians being know-alls and interfering and talking about things they're not fully informed of. Now, I feel I've brought up education items before. Councillor McMahon says this, and he said, all right, go at me. As I said, he's entitled to. But I'm going to give one example back. It was an issue with the fourth year exams. I respectfully approached all the leaders and set out my stall in the paper. And
Councillor Boyd, I think, again, on behalf of the Provost, the point you're bringing has no real obvious bearing on the matter before the Council just now.
If you want them.
You're now referring back to previous reports and previous occasions. If there are issues about how any members responding to any other member in the chamber, there's other measures and approaches that can be taken to deal with that. But urging all members to recognise there are 32 of you, and if everybody is requiring to share the full life experience in order to explain the context of the opinions they're expressing, then all of these meetings are going to be an awful lot longer. So with respect, what happened in this chamber on another day is probably not going to be of direct relevance to the matter in front of the council today. Sorry, but that's the case.
No, that's absolutely fine. But all I was going to say was I had the voice in a one-to-one of the Education Secretary who agreed with my point, yet the administration group weren't prepared to listen to me. And then Councillor McMahon launches that attacking me, which is absolutely fine. And I'll say with respect, see when it comes to the coal mining debates, etc., I don't say anything. I'm really respectful and listen because I don't know what I'm talking about with coal mining. I think, so I keep out of that because I respect everything there. But Councillor McMahon, who doesn't understand all the context of young people, chooses to launch an attack on me like that.
Provost, through you, and in order to assist, I think what you have, Councillor Boyd, is a situation where you expressed your opinion and another member in the chamber expressed his opinion in response. Neither have crossed any lines in terms of what they said, either in your primary submission or the response. Everyone has an opinion, and I'll stop that sentence there.
Okay, members. Would anyone else like to? Sorry, yeah, thank you, Eddie. Councillor Richardson online.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Claire. just the the way the conversations went the last 5-10 minutes in chambers, I'd just like to say that antisocial behaviour has always existed. I mean, when I was younger and going to the football, I wasn't part of this scene at all. But we can all remember, the casuals of the early 80s through the 90s, where it was maybe because, and the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't matter which political parties in power, antisocial behaviour has always existed. This was probably during the time of the Tories, so the youngsters were buying all the best gear possible, the Fred Perrys and what have you, and the fancy jumpers. But at the end of the day, antisocial behaviour has always existed. These young guys were phoning each other up and arranging to have a fight before the football, That has died away, but antisocial behaviour still persists in other forms, and I don't really see it as a problem that the government of the day has created. It's always been there, whether it's mods v rockers down the front at Brighton, whether it's football casuals, it's always existed in some form or another. Now, the point that David Mitchell made was very well made, and I want to congratulate David on it. I think the problem we have as politicians is the general public don't believe that at the real, the real bad cases, they don't believe that there's any punishment anymore. So this is where, again, the far right steps in and says that the politicians of today have lost control because there's no repercussions for bad behaviour, and I think that's an issue for the real bad cases that politicians of all parties need to cover. Whereas I am of the view that's also been stated in chambers, 90% of our youngsters are great. They're not getting involved in any antisocial behaviour. It's only the ones that we know of, the small minority who are at that point where they possibly are out of control. That's where there needs to be repercussions, and the public need to see that the politicians of today, whatever party's in power, is bringing in repercussions for real bad antisocial behaviour. But it's always existed, and it doesn't matter which party's in power. There's always been a level of antisocial behaviour through the decades. That's all I wanted to say, Provost.
Provost, through you, I think just to clarify again for the benefit of all merits, that what's before the Council is a draft anti-behaviour strategy which sets out how the Council would propose to use its powers under the legislation and invites approval for the purposes of consultation. Nowhere in that legislation does the Council have the power to punish anyone for anything. What the Council has the power to do is consider making application to the court for an antisocial behaviour order, whether against an adult or an under 16. If a young person under 12 commits a crime, they're below the age of criminal responsibility, and there's no question of punishment for anything. If they're over 12, the first decision-making process is the Procurator Fiscal in relation to any criminal charges. Do they get prosecuted in the courts or not? The most serious offences, if a young person below 16, for instance, commits murder or rape or serious assaults or attempted murders, they will normally, not always, but usually be prosecuted. Certainly the murders and that, I'm maybe going into the serious assaults, but the Fiscal takes that first decision. Is there to be a prosecution for those offences? If there is, that will go through a court process. If not, they'll divert them into the Children's Reporters, the administration, the Children's Panel process. What you're dealing with here is behaviour by that small group within that group of under 16s that all the statistics support that definition. What you're looking to do as a council with your strategy is set out what use you'll make of the powers that are available to supplement what can happen through that criminal process in the most extreme cases, and define and try to define with the agreement of partners the circumstances where the council would see fit to make an application for an ASBO. But as we've rehearsed before in this chamber, the council making a decision unilaterally to apply for an ASBO, even in accordance with the strategy, still requires the buy-in in any particular case of all the other partners named. It would be the police that would investigate any alleged criminal offences, that would put the report into the Fiscal, who might then decide not to prosecute or refer to the Children's Panel. what we're trying to set out here is where we then would look in the most limited number of those cases, the most extreme cases where there is that significant risk to public safety, if there's repetition of offending or of antisocial behaviour short of offending, is to set out where we would look to use the powers with the support of partners. Members also need to bear in mind, going back to the punishment piece, that if a young person, an under 16 ASBO is granted, or an order is granted against a young person under 16, and if they breach that order, imposition of a custodial sentence by the courts isn't an option. So whatever they've done to get the ASBO, if they then don't comply with the ASBO, the legislation still doesn't allow the court to put them into prison or punish them in that way. So I just need to be absolutely clear here that while I understand the political dimension and the wider view that's been taken about society's problems and all the rest of it, with respect, this is about what this council can do for our interest within our statutory powers to support all of the activity of government and everyone else. This also got a role to play here in that wider piece, but in continuing to reflect in that wider piece, we maybe lose sight of our own element and contribution to this, which is the strategy. And I would urge members to focus on what is before council and what council can do here within the gift of the powers that are afforded to council, rather than perhaps what others could do from the outside looking in.
Thanks as always, David, for injecting some levity. Councillor Crawford.
Thanks, Provost. Just to remind folk that I was at a meeting many years ago when Margaret Curran was the minister, and she announced that she were going to have this revolutionary antisocial behaviour team. It's still the same. I don't see nothing change.
Thank you. Okay, members, I think we'll wrap it up there, unless somebody's really want to come in. Members will be happy to approve the paper. Thank you. Moving on, as you'll know, we're moving past agenda item 11. We're going on straight on to 12, and this is a request from the SNP group for various changes to committee. Is the council happy to approve? Perfect. Council, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a lovely Christmas, and that concludes the recording of the meeting. Thank you.